Whether it's the cash call challenge that the industry had many years ago, or the prominence that marginal fields got at some point in the course of doing business in this industry, or even giving gas its own attention under this current administration. NAPE's pre-conference workshop has played a critical role in shaping policy narrative in Nigeria's oil and gas industry. Experts are brought into the room. They give their best opinion on challenges and profile solutions at the same time. Those solutions are put together in a communique by NAPE and delivered to the appropriate authorities at the opening ceremony. Same document, through advocacy is pushed by this great association through corridors when necessary, and most times lend their voice in lawmaking and policy decisions. So NAPE's pre-conference workshop is not just a tradition to keep, but it's an opportunity for NAPE to positively impact the industry. And this time we're looking at something that is more like the lifeline of our industry in terms of ramping up productions. Recent trends in divestments and acquisitions in the Nigerian oil and gas industry, near and long-term implications. Late last year, my family visited a family friend, a dear friend of my wife, and she happens to be working with one of the companies that has recently been divested. She expressed fear and concern about the future of people like her who worked in these divest companies. Well, I'm not so sure she knew the privilege that I have interacting with the industry, because they've not seen each other for many years. And as I was speaking with her on the phone, I was not there in person, I could really hear her anxiety in her voice. What is the future of their job? What is the future of this? Will this be this? Will that be that? And then I said to her, if pedigree is anything to go by, she should go to sleep and snore. Because the men and women who have taken up these assets are not people who want to buy 4 private jets and have pizza in Paris and ice cream in Italy and, amala in Ibadan under one day. It's not their interest. Their interest is not to buy skyscrapers in Switzerland. Their interest is they're born with a desire, I told her, with a passion to see this industry grow. They're born with a desire to see that jobs are kept. They're born with a desire to see that production is ramped up and the industry benefits in the long term. So I did my little best to allay her fears. I spoke with her not too long ago. She said, well, with what she's seeing, she's impressed. She's hoping it continues and all. So when we talk about near and long-term implications, human capital is one of those near and long-term implications. How to keep this human capital being acquired. Keep them focused, keep them excited, keep them interested, so that the visionaries would bring out the vision and they will run with it. These and many more are some of the conversations that our panel of experts and speakers will be having today. Once again, Richmond Osuji is my name, working alongside Temiloluwa Wonbiobon. I will get the event started now with the first stanza of the national anthem. Please rise.
Nigeria, we hail thee, our own dear native land. Though tribe and tongue may differ, in brotherhood we stand. Nigerians all and proud to serve our sovereign motherland.
We may be seated. Thank you very much. Let me now invite the HSE specialist rather, for a hotel and suite to walk us through some safety briefing. Let's welcome Odumosu Augustine. Please a warm applause for our safety specialists.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I welcome you to Eco Hotel and Suite. I'm Odumosu Augustine by name. I will be giving us the HSE brief should in case of any emergency about the preparedness and also medvac. There won't be fire drill this morning, but in case of any fire alarm, please, you are expected to leave this hall by using our emergency exit route. Our emergency exit route, one of them is by my right-hand side. You make use of this, that leads to the nearest muster point. Then also another one behind that also leads to the nearest muster point. Our marshals are on ground to welcome us and also take us to the service muster point. In case of medical emergencies, which we are not praying for, be rest assured that a hotel got it covered. That is, we have our clinic, then also we have nurses and doctors standby. Then also, a hotel partners with hospital that is less than 5 minute drive away from here. So such IP will be taking them before taking him or her to his preferred or our hospital. Under emergencies as well, which we are not praying for, please, no matter what happens, such as emergencies such as a fire outbreak, please do not make use of the elevators, but rather make use of the emergency exit as I stated. Under emergency as well, please make use of the in-house phone by dialing the number 0. That's our emergency call number, which attention will be given. Also, on security aspect, be rest assured that Ecotek got it covered. That is, we have both our internal and external forces working 24/7 on ground to make sure the environment is safe. That is to tell us that we are in a safer environment. Also under security, please, it is very, very advisable that we watch out for our belongings, such as our laptops, our phones. And also on security reasons, it is better that we keep our eyes on these things because we don't want issue where a complaint will come about missing of belongings and the rest. Then on the restroom, please, the restroom is immediately step out of this hall. Find your way to the front of the signature. By your first right-hand side, that's where we have the restroom for both the ladies and the gents. Remember again, should in case of any emergency, please dial 0 on our in-house phone. Thank you for giving me your attention. Ecotel cares about you. Once again, welcome to Ecotel and Suite. Enjoy your meeting.
Eco Hotel cares for you. Thank you so much, Augustine Odumosu. Okay. In addition to what he has said, please turn your phones to silence and vibrations. And should you be giving a pack today or throughout the conference, I would always advise that you do not put your personal belongings inside identical conference bags. That said, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let's get into the business of the morning. You already have the agenda. Because of time, I would like to just acknowledge a lot of our past presidents who are here. I may not do that by name, but I will ask you to please give our past presidents a resounding applause. Please give them a round of applause. Our past presidents, our fellows, our board of trustee members. Of course, our BOT chairman is here, Mr. George Osahon F. NAPE. Very good morning to you, sir. We thank you. Our speakers, our keynote speaker, Mr. Ademi Barrow, our industry leader and master entrepreneur who is also on our panel, Dr. Laif Atona F. NAPE. Very good morning to all of you. All of our speakers, all of our panelists, we welcome all of you. You get to meet them when it's time for them to speak. We welcome them. And of course, we want to also say a big congratulations to the president, the vice president, the president-elect of NAPE for a job well done that they are doing. You get to meet all of them shortly. Speaking of vice president-elect, her company has sponsored free Wi-Fi for those who just joined us. I'm saying part of what she observed as a NAPE member over the years is that people tend to go outside looking for better reception to work on their devices or go back to their offices. So our company has sponsored efficient Wi-Fi network for you throughout the course of the conference week beginning today. It is, there you go, Ingencia Energies is the username, and the password is BCW2025. So I want to give them a round of applause for that, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. We also want to say a big thank you to Energia. We'll get to also hear from their CEO a little later. Please give them a round of applause. They are the sponsors for this pre-conference workshop. Thank you so much, Energia. We appreciate your sponsorship. And we welcome all of our distinguished members who've joined us, our young professionals, industry captains, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the pre-conference workshop on the theme, as I mentioned earlier. Let's get into the business now as we welcome the president of NAPE. Please, with a warm applause, let's welcome Mr. John Bosco Uche, FNAPE, for his opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. MC, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I want to give my welcome remarks, but before I go in there, just to say, to also apologize for starting late, about 1 hour behind. I want to believe that by the time we're done today, the quality of discussions and what is going to be coming out of this pre-conference workshop and the impact is going to make for our nation, we will be happy to have participated in this pre-conference workshop of NAPE. Now, I want to stand on the already established protocol, but I think it's also fair, because this is the only time I'm going to be speaking today, to recognize and say a big thank you for our special guests that have showed up today. The chairman of the Board of Governors, who is our keynote speaker. The chairman of Energia, who is also the chairman of our Board of Trustees, George Osaho. And by the way, our keynote speaker, Ademola Ademi Bello. Also, one of our key panelists, Dr. Lai Fatana, Chairman, Renaissance Africa Energy Company, and the COO of Energia, Oladimeji Bashirun, again, for sponsoring this event. And other speakers and panelists that we have, Taiwo Okwo, Oliver Onyekweli, Professor Benga, and our moderator, Toyin. I really want to say thank you up front before we go into the main session itself. Dear distinguished fellows that are here, present, past presidents, distinguished members, invited guests, and our dear friends and associates and members of the press. It's truly a pleasure to welcome every single one of you to this pre-conference workshop, which is one of the important sessions that we have leading into the main conference. We had the very first one last Saturday, which is the golf tournament that we had in Uyo, successfully delivered. And this is the very second one that we're delivering before we start the main conference, which the theme is revitalizing the Nigerian petroleum exploration and production strategies for energy security and sustainable development. This theme clearly speaks directly to the times we live in today and the choices we must take and make as an industry. Now, but today we've gathered to discuss a topic that has even become more of a defining feature in our industry. I mean, you see the theme for the pre-conference workshop around recent trends in divestments and acquisitions in the Nigerian oil and gas industry, near and long-term implications. It could not be more timely. And I like the parts that we talked about near and long-term, because in the near term, we need to increase the production. The country, we're pushing to hit the 3 million barrels. The last time the GCO announced the number, we're doing about 1.68, still rising. And we have to push it to that 3 million target. But most importantly, the long term itself, sustaining that production is also key. And that's why we, the explorers, we NAPE members, we have to go find this oil and gas to ensure that we have additional reserves to sustain that production in the longer term. So the topic is quite apt, and that's what we're going to be discussing today. Now, we've seen the shifting tides in the industry, the international oil companies, the IOCs, divesting the onshore and shallow water assets, reshaping their portfolio, moving into deep water. And then you then see the new dynamics defining the new ownership and responsibility for these new assets, the independence, the indigenous taking up that challenge. We saw what happened recently, the renaissance of this world, the Oandos, and even those that were here before now, the first EMP, the Aradel, you can name them, the Energia. So taking this position to be able to reshape this industry and create value for this country as well. And most importantly, provide the energy needs of the world. Now, these transitions come with promise. But I want to mention that it's not just about the promise, it also demands for deeper reflection on how we must sustain, maintain technical excellence, and secure the future of our industry. That's what we must do. And therefore, for us at NAPE, this is what we do best, creating the right platform where knowledge meets action, where industry leaders, professionals, and policymakers come together to explore ideas, challenge assumptions, and drive conversations that move our sector forward. I also want to mention that you can also ask, how many times have we been doing this pre-conference workshop? Every year we do it, and what do we do with what comes out of this? The MC mentioned around the impact we've made through the communiques that have come out of this type of discussion. The marginal field that we're operating today, the framework, we know we kickstarted that discussion, and today is a reality. But I want to tell you as well that what comes out of this session today is not just going to end on Monday next week at the opening ceremony where we will hand over the communique. We typically now make a step further to even do a follow-up engagement with the policymakers and with government officials. That's what we did, for example, when we started our administration this year in January. We took the communique to the special advisor to the president, Ms. Olu, to discuss the details of that communique, so that it's not just one of those documents you drop in the office and nothing happens. That's a key commitment we have, and we'll continue to do so. Also, already, even for some of you that participated at the NAPE at 50, which we celebrated in August, we also came up with a communique. And we didn't just end it there. A few weeks ago, we were at Abuja to meet and pay a courtesy visit to the GCU of NMPCL, again, to discuss that communique on what we can do together. In that meeting, he made a commitment to partner with us around academy towards human capital development. So it's not just putting the communique out there, but it's also taking commitment both from us in NAPE, the policymakers, and the regulators. The NUPRC, CCE already also has demanded for that communique because he feels that we can make more impact through what we do in NAPE. So I just want to give you the assurance that whatever we're going to discuss today is not going to end in here in this room. It will be presented on Monday at the opening ceremony, but we will take it further. And I want to believe that, and I'm confident that the incoming president, the president-elect, will drive this because it's something we've started quite well this year. So that's the commitment I want to leave here before every one of you. Now, before I leave here, I want to commend the conference planning committee led by the president-elect and also the pre-conference subcommittee itself led by Atopa Adeleja and the entire committee members for planning this workshop with a very strong lineup of speakers and panelists. If you look at the speakers we have, thank you. It couldn't have been better. If we cannot fix this challenge we have and provide solutions for this nation from this lineup, then that means we'll never get it solved. So I think we've got the top quality speakers and panelists that will do justice to this. So I say a big thank you. I also want to acknowledge our sponsor, Energia Limited, for what you continue to do, for your consistent partnership and support for professional development through NAPE. You've been quite consistent. I know last year conference, you supported us quite well. Again, this year, you're doing it again. And I can also predict already that next year, you'll do it again. So as we listen and discuss and share our experiences today, let's remember that the future of our industry must be shaped not by the assets that we hold. It has to be by the insights that we share and the decisions we make together. Once again, welcome to these important sessions, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being part of this NAPE's continuous journey of excellence, innovation, and impact. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. John Bosco Uche F. NAPE, President of NAPE. Welcoming us and giving that assurance that with NAPE, the pre-conference workshop or even the other meetings, it is not just a talk shop. It's a commitment to not just find oil and gas, but to help profile solutions when challenges meet finding oil and gas. So thank you very much. Please give him another round of applause. Okay. Like NAPE, that is committed to finding oil and gas, our sponsors on this occasion are committed to excellence, sustainability, and community development, amongst many other things, using their company to ensure that energy meets excellence. Thank them again and again, as I like to welcome now the Chief Operating Officer, who would come speak to us by way of sponsors' remarks. Please welcome the CEO of Energia Limited, Oladimeji Bashoron.
Thank you very much, Desmond. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please let me stand on existing protocol. I want to say welcome. Why is Energia sponsoring this? Especially the trend in divestment. By nameplate, the largest terminal now is Akwa Ibom, and it's held by Seplat. So Seplat must succeed, so that as a nation, we have access to export our crude. The same thing with Renaissance, holding Focados and Bonny. Also, you look at even Ohando. The least of the land terminal is held by Chevron, but the biggest is held as a result of this divestment. So I have vested interests because we must continue to sell. And so why we are sponsoring this is because we believe the success of divestment is the success of the nation, is also the success of Africa. And that's our commitment as a company. We also believe that the challenges are not insurmountable. Energia has been around for 22 years. We are a product of marginal field. We've actually operated, starting with the field that Total actually estimated to be 5 million barrels reserve. We are currently at 60 million because of diligence, because of what we put into it. And we know that the likes of Adeyemi Bero, they've told us that offshore is still another opportunity. So as we go into the trend, we are looking forward to something that will come out of this. Energia is unique because we are one that actually we gave back to the PIA 3%. Up till today, we still give 3% of our revenue to the community. And we've been operating for 22 years. We've never had any community incursion. So we believe in social impact where we operate. And we are proud of that. So we come here to say the opportunity is huge. We are glad partners with NAPE. We hope to sponsor more, like the president said. And we hope to leave this place convinced that we have actually continued to impact the industry. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oladimeji Bashoron, COO of Energia there, telling us why they would continue to support ventures like this. These divestments must succeed. because if it does, Nigeria succeeds itself. Please give Nigeria a round of applause. Thank you very much. And thank you for sponsoring PCW next year. PE, am I in order? Okay, thank you very much. My piece, I'm in order, I'm in order. Thank you very much. Okay, our keynote speaker today is one who has spent over the last 4 decades in this oil and gas industry, 20 years working with BG in Nigeria. Excuse me, working with BG in Nigeria as their CEO at the time, having worked with Shell as well before venturing into entrepreneurship to found what is today become a poster child when it comes to this conversation of increased production. He's an accomplished industry executive with a broad experience base across various roles and geography, and the founder and chief executive officer and managing director of First Exploration and Production Development Company Limited, a Nigerian independent energy company with presence in Nigeria and the sub-Saharan Africa. He leads the company's drive towards the attainment of a sustainably successful integrated energy solutions businesses, and sits on a lot of governing councils and boards within and outside the industry. Please welcome with me a man whose name has a ring with excellence, Mr. Ademola Adeyemi Barrow.
Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Let me first of all thank the president of NAPE and the incoming president for inviting me to be the keynote speaker at this event. I'm a technical person, and whenever NAPE, and I have to also talk about my own constituency, not being a geoscientist, SPE, invite me to come and talk, I never say no. Because the core of our industry is really the technical side of getting the oil and gas out of the ground. If the oil and gas is not well defined, if we can't get it out of the ground, everything else is noise. And that's where it starts from. So it's a pleasure, and I can see a lot of my ogas, egbons, they're all gray hairs, they're all still dragging themselves. So it's a pleasure to see my good brother, Dr. Lai Fatuna. You know, I always call him, if there's one person who is our leader in this industry, I always say it's Dr. Fatuna. Why? Because the renaissance of the indigenous company, the birth of the indigenous companies and how they've grown, Dr. Fatuna, you know, he moved ahead and all of us said, this man, there's something he's saying. And that's why today he's the chairman of Renaissance and probably one of the biggest oil and gas companies. And then I saw Oga George, he's always on his phone. You know, but I can name a lot of people here. I only have 20 minutes. But also a pleasure to see my big brother who we started the journey of First TMP together, Dr. Emmanuel Eno. It was good to see him today. You know, the first question he asked me was, how are we doing? And I said, we're drilling an exploration well, Doc. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been given a task to talk about divestment and acquisitions, near and long-term implications. I will not talk about divestments and acquisitions. You know what has happened. But I will set the context of what is changing. And in setting that context, I will talk about what it means, what it means for our country. And I also tell you what I see as the near-term and the long-term implications. But you know, I always like to be provocative, so I'll also talk to us geoscientists, engineers, commercial people, what we need to do. Because the baton has been placed in our hands. So you will not hear me talk about, oh, this divestment happened. You all know. So the first picture for me is, what does it mean for Nigeria? Nigeria wants to be a $1 trillion economy. Let's not worry where we are today. If we're a $1 trillion economy, we will all feel it. Is it possible? Yes. Who is going to make it possible? We, who are in the oil and gas sector, have a responsibility. Probably we have the primary responsibility to drive that engine. Energy access and security is a must. And we have failed as an industry, or as a group of those who are looking after the resources, in making that happen. We may say, well, government. And I'll come and talk about some of them. Nigeria needs to grow at a 10% capital growth rate. We need to grow at a 10% rate. The oil and gas sector can enable that to happen. Because without electricity, without fuel, the economy is not going to grow. So we have a responsibility. The economy needs to be diversified. It's probably too centralized around oil and gas, tech, financial services, and a few others. But the oil and gas has the special elements to enable that diversification to happen. Just the impact of the Dangote refinery alone has had an impact on FX, GDP growth. So can you imagine if that had happened 50 years ago, or if the refineries, I remember the first time when I went to work in Warri, the Warri Petrochemical and the refinery plant were coming on then. We're all excited. 40 years hence, we tell a different story. Human capital development. The international companies have done their own. It's our own turn to make sure that we don't drop the ball. So when I heard my brother talking about the lady who was concerned, they're concerned because they think, you know, the international companies have come and they've gone. The Nigerian companies will just not train all of us. So we're in trouble. So we all have a responsibility. I wanted to show this picture because this is what we should be driving at. We can have oil and gas. UAE, Saudi, if you listen to what they said in ADIPEC, Qatar is a small nation, but they're punching their weight globally. With what? With their oil and their gas resources. UAE, Saudi, Kuwait. What are we doing? So how do we, so if you say, well, I don't believe in Nigeria, but I'm doing oil and gas, then go and do it somewhere else. Because we have to use our resources to step up as a country. You know, they say we're the giant of Africa. What does that mean? We're a giant because of our people. We're also a giant because the good Lord placed resources beneath our soil for us to grow. So I wanted to show this picture first. It's not about the M&A that's happened. The internationals have done it. But I actually think that God also decided to hand it over to Nigerians to say, they've started it. Now let me give it to the owners to make it happen and happen properly. That's why I wanted to share this first picture. The second picture I would like to share is, we've been an oil and gas exporting country. We produce oil. We say, what's the oil price today? Put it in a tank. We send it to Obodo Oyibo. For 40, 50 years. You blame Shell, you blame Exxon. No, I don't. They're businesses. They're looking for feedstock for their industrialization. If you give it to them, they'll take it. And I'm saying, if you go to Saudi today, if you go to UAE, if if you go to Qatar, if you go to Malaysia, if you go to Petronas, if you go to Brazil, they're extending the value chain and keeping it in their space. Now, one man builds a refinery. We fight him, we argue with him, bold enough. But the impact of Dangote refinery on our GDP, on our foreign exchange, whether we say the refinery is working optimally or not, doesn't matter. But it's at least selling some products. It's going to have a big impact. If the president had said, I'm canceling subsidy and I'm not going to allow multiple exchange rates, and we didn't have an option for having products in this country, I'm sure he would have changed that policy and he would have gone back to subsidy. It's as simple as that. Let's not over-argue it. This message is saying we need to decline export. All of us, my brothers here, we all like to sell, but the person that must buy from us must be a willing buyer, seller at the right price. I'm investing in dollars, so don't come and sell it to me in Naira. If I invest in dollars, pay me in dollars. But we can make that happen. So, oil, and it's not just the Dangote refineries. So the first Ogbele refinery, the Watersmith refinery, the one in Edo State, all of those refineries are required. So let me first say my first provocative point here. NNPC has not been able to make those refineries work. The question is, if Aliko can really get to 1.3 or 1.4 million, and Watersmith refinery, the one in Ogbele, the plethora of the indigenous refineries coming through, if the Boa refinery works, who cares if NNPC makes theirs work or not? Who cares if it's mothballed? We will have the refining capacity Nigeria needs. And we should focus more on that. Because when we can create the value here, what we're beginning to see is that we become a hub for white products, not just for Nigeria, but for sub-Saharan Africa, maybe even across Africa and the rest of the world. And gas. Key message is we need to shift from being export-driven to value-enhancing. If we don't do this over the next decade, we have failed. I just wanted to show this. This is the gas value chain. It's a very busy slide. My intention is not for you to read that. I don't know, do we have 220 TCF or 600 TCF? We produce on an average day maybe 7, 8 BCF a day. Most of that goes to NLNG. And maybe 2 BCF goes to domestic. And we flare, burn, use another 1. Is there something wrong with us? Seriously, we should ask ourselves, is there something wrong with us? This is the fuel for power. But we can't make the power chain work. And as long as I know, we've been talking about gas pricing. And we're hoping that somebody out there is going to help us solve our problem. I just believe that we need a Dangote. I'm not saying it's him. We need a Dangote to come and solve this our power problem. One person or two people who just say, you know what, let's go and do it. Let's just get this thing done. And it will happen. Tony Atta, CEO of Renaissance, said part of the task they've taken is how can they get into this energy solution game? By using gas for power. So they've made a bold move that Renaissance will get to a BCF a day for domestic, having delivered the 2 BCF a day for an LNG. And they will do it. Because somebody just decides, you know what, let's do it. So you can see that 6.3 BCF or 7 BCF a day, and you have 200 TCF of reserves. To finish all of those reserves, you need 90 years. I know most of us will not be here in 90 years. So we have too much gas. So explorationists, I think you are wearing too much suit. And you are sitting in air-conditioned office. You need to be out there on the rocks, checking stratigraphy, and letting us drill exploration wells. So exploration folks in this room, I'm going to yab you a bit today. Let me quickly talk to near-term implications. If we get the next 5 years right, and let me say this, I believe the president has done a few very good things. Executive order, allowing some FIDs to pass, giving us one of us to be the head of NMPC, who knows how to run a company, making sure that the implementation of the PIA, no matter whether it's perfect or not, is being implemented diligently by NUPRC and NMDPRA. They're doing their job. It's a lot better. However, to get that, these are the implications. Like I said, economic independence, more revenue, fiscal pressure lightens. Job. You know, everybody says we want to get to 2.5 million barrels a day. The last time we did that, whether you were in Ugeli, in Warri, Port Harcourt, Eket, Calabar, it was buzzing. So if you want to know whether we're getting there, go to those towns and see if it's buzzing. My own view is when we're getting to 2.5, 3, it's not just Port Harcourt or it's not just Lagos. You will feel it in Ugeli, you will feel it in Sapele, you will feel it in Warri, because activities will be going on. For the last 20 years, those cities have been quiet. Even Port Harcourt is not what it used to be. Gas utilization. Yeah, oil production, whether we're going to 2, whether you're going to 2.5, whether you're going to 3, it doesn't matter. Start going. Today, because of the job I sit in OPEC, Nigeria has a capacity for about 1.8. We need more quota. Pipeline availability in the last 5-6 months has been almost above 95%. Hasn't been like that in years. We have over 60 rigs drilling. So the drive to get to that production over the next 5 years is the most. We cannot take away regulatory and government reform. And it's happening. But they need to do more. I always hear when they say they want to change the PIA, let's just progressively make it better. But let's not change the fundamentals of the PIA. The separation of responsibility is very important. Regulators should not be a commercial entity. Those who are talking about it, they should stop. I don't want on one day my regulator is regulating me. Next day he says, okay, let's talk about commercial. It's going to confuse me. Can I make your guy judge? You say, they will like, come, you have not done this. Then the next day he says, okay, let's sign this. Doesn't make sense. Naira stability. If we can start to sell some oil in Naira, because it works for both parties, we should do it. Because your strength of your Naira is because what it commands in trade. The reason why nobody wants Naira is because outside this space, but the day you can pay for oil in Naira because both parties, and I insist both parties like it strengthens our Naira. So these for me are the near-term implications if we get it right. These are the longer-term ones, and I want to speak to this very quickly. I've had an opportunity in OPEC to sit next to different countries. Ladies and gentlemen, oil and gas is not their focus. Oil and gas is not their focus. They're focused on the future. Saudis are building new tech cities. Qatar has decided we are commanding gas supply in the world. What do we want to command? We want to start commanding other things. But we, we're still focused on this oil and gas. So after, in the long term, transition is going to happen. Oil is going nowhere. We just have to make sure we're cleaner environmentally, we're cleaner in emissions. It's just going to be part of the mix. But its contribution will be increasingly less than gas and other things. So we must get to energy sufficiency. It will be sad in 2031, 2032, Nigeria is talking about we don't have light. You know, if you tell someone abroad and said, I don't have light, the person will say, light? What do you mean light? I don't have electricity. The world is getting globally competitive. The question is, who does not have oil under their ground? It's not those who have oil anymore. I believe Nigeria should position itself in the next decade that we become that hub for fueling Africa. Because we'll do Nigeria easily. Economic diversification, yes. Institutional and human capacity development. My own hope, you know, I see a lot of people outside, they say, oh, I'm in Canada, I'm in Australia, we can provide you services. I said, no, don't come and provide me services, come back home. And I know it's a sensitive topic because the economy is tough, Nigeria is tough. But, you know, this migration that we're doing, the Chinese and Indians have done it decades before. If you go to Harvard and they tell you the Chinese have headed back, the Indians are doing the same. This economy needs our diaspora. But my plea for any diaspora in the room is, yeah, Nigeria is tough, but we're on a path, on a journey. Come back. Come back. Because a lot of us here are old. I can see some young guys because I can see their hair. They have a lot of hair. There's no strand of white in it. But we outnumber them, we with gray hair. We outnumber them in this room. So where are the young ones? These are the long-term implications. So short-term, next 5 years, up to 2030, let's get our industry right. Long-term, let's say what influence must this oil and gas play in the future of Nigeria and the world? That's how I see it in its simple terms. And I get to my last slide, and this is where I'd like to have a discussion with all of us. 40 billion barrels of oil, 600 trillion cubic feet of gas, 200 trillion proved, known that it's there. I'm the giant of Africa. Yeah, but giant that doesn't have light. Let's be honest with ourselves. Why can't we make it work? So I'll start from inside this room. How much exploration is going on in our companies? NAPE, if you're a NAPE member and you don't have exploration wells in your company, you are earning salary without delivering value. I know this is me stabbing you guys in the back place. But if you're a NAPE member and you're not doing exploration and appraisal in your company, you should be asking yourself that every month you should pay them salary. Because these volumes are large. We went to AEW, and Renaissance said he has 11 billion barrels of oil and gas resources. 11 billion. An expatriate told me, one company? Some countries don't have this. My time is going, so I need to talk to the 6 points very quickly. So upstream industry landscape has changed. The players are now NNPC, the Nigerian independents, and IOCs. We have also dimension where everybody will play. IOCs take deep water, take integrated gas, and Chevron and the likes join us on the JV side. But the responsibility has come to the Nigerians. And we have to take that responsibility very serious. And it's not just producing oil and getting to 2 or 3 million barrels a day, but it's also the feedstock, exploration, appraisal, field development plans, and all of that. The shift from export to in-country is a must. As first TMP, we're already saying, I won't do oil because I can sell my oil to Dangote, but I must do gas. Other Middle Eastern countries and Eastern European countries and countries in South America are already using their oil as an enabler. They are seeing 30, 40 years into the future for their countries. Oil is just an enabler. They don't see it as it's a revenue source, it's a catalyst, but they're already into AI, into tech, into infrastructure, into other things. Nigeria needs to get there. I'll go to 5. We need to do energy transition. Let me come to 4. And I start to close because I can see competence, capability, capacity for growth. I don't think we're ready to grow. No, let me change my words. I believe we're not. How much geoscience work is going on in the companies, even in the major IOC companies? How much? Is that competence there? And it's not just that, it's wells, field development, WRFM production. This is the basics, and my fear is that not enough is going on in the companies. And this subsurface is so easy. Technology and AI, and I also want to talk to the service companies. Like I say that maybe we don't have the numbers for growth here. The service companies also have to wake up. Because do we have the level of service contractors for a $2.5 million barrel a day growth? So to add an additional million, where are the service companies? Because don't forget, we will plan, we'll say we're going to drill. Where are the service companies? Where are the competence? I know that Schlumberger, Baker, Halliburton are there, but truly, their A team is not here unless you insist on it. Agencies and regulators have to do their bit. Now, as I close, let me talk about oil price, because if I don't, then everybody will say, well, what has it done in OPEC and what does it listen to? So let me say this. Everyone who is a producer or supplier of oil into the global market wants oil at a price that's not too low and probably not too high, but as high as it can in some instances. So when you see it going to, are we going to be at $40? Are we going to be at 50? Are we going to be at 60? This is my view. Even the Middle East, they need the oil price in the 60s and 70s and above. Why? Because they are investing in new things into the future and they need that revenue. I would say Saudi probably needs 70 for the kind of capital development they have set off. Nigeria needs it in 100 if we can. But if we get it to 100, Dangote can buy it at 100. So you have to get a balance. The US, of course, Donald Trump will say that when the oil price is low, then the price of petrol goes down. So he tells his people, I have lowered price for you. But the guys doing shale to get a loan to go and frack more wells needs oil price at 60 and 70. That's the reality. In the UK, where things are tough, they need oil price at 60 to make things work. So my own view to all of you is when you see the thing drop, don't get worried. I think oil price will band between 60 and 70. And if it stays there, we're all fine. When it goes to 70, 80, refineries and downstream suffer. When it goes below 60 to 50, you cannot make your projects work in some very challenging areas. So my own key message to all of us is, for Nigeria, if we stay between 60 and 70, we'll all be fine. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to stop here. I've taken too much of my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ademola Adeyemi, should I say, His Excellency. Now, for those who do not know, because I didn't mention it earlier, this level of brilliance was what earned him the appointment as Nigeria's OPEC governor. And upon getting to Vienna, the governors made him the chairman of OPEC Board of Governors. By the way, he's the first in our country to be taken from the private part of the industry into that position. Usually, you need to come from the national oil company, from the ministry into that position. So that's what your brilliance can earn you. Please, one round of applause for him. Thank you very much. Okay. I know a couple of you would want to interact with our speakers as they speak. Please note your comments, your questions. At the end of all the presentations, we have them on the panel to be joined by renowned experts, again, like themselves, to have a conversation moderated by a remarkable moderator. When we get there, you'll see it. So please note your comment, note your questions, so that when the moderator calls for those, you're not trying to remember what one speaker said. You can just note them down now as they are speaking. Thank you very much, sir, for giving us that foundation setting keynote presentation. As we begin the journey to the other presentations from yours, I go over now to the next presenter, who will be talking to us on the sub-theme 1 of building local capacity to enhance the future of exploration and production in the Nigerian oil and gas industry. He is an expert that has over 23 years of varied experience in the oil and gas sector, the academia in Nigeria, Ghana, and the United Kingdom. He's also a chartered engineer. He's a professor of energy geomechanics, and he is an internationally recognized expert in petroleum engineering and energy geomechanics, and has interest in carbon capture, storage, and underground hydrogen storage research. You can learn a bit more about him in the brochure that you already have. To save time, please welcome the Professor of Energy Geomechanics at Robert Gordon University in Aberdeen, UK, Professor Gbenga Oluyemi. We don't know whether he's answering the call of the governor of OPEC or he's coming to go and go. We'll find out. We'll find out. We'll find out. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. The MC, I'm going to be speaking to the last statement you made, because as I sat there and listened to him talk, I know we had a conversation just before this event. I'm sure he wasn't directing that at me, but of course, there is always an opportunity to respond. I'm going to be speaking on the themes building local capacity to enhance the future of the oil and gas industry in Nigeria. And I've titled my own presentation, Building Local Capacity in the Nigerian Oil and Gas Industry, Prospects, Opportunities, and Challenges. But before I start, I just want to thank the incoming president of NAPE for inviting me to give this presentation. And of course, I want to extend my gratitude to Mr. John Bosco, who is the outgoing president of NAPE. I'm going to say this is my first sort of engagement with NAPE. Of course, I'm very, very active in the Nigerian XPE. Just last August, I was here participating in the Nigerian Society of petroleum engineer conference in August, from 3rd of August, I think, to about, I've forgotten now. So, and those of us who are in the diasporas, we always want to, come back, and that's one of the things I was discussing with Mr. Adeyemi Berry. Just we always want to come back, of course, to kind of contribute our home quota to the development of the oil and gas industry here. And I must say that we have huge pool of talent, working in every country of the world. Wherever you find petroleum, wherever you find oil and gas, you find Nigerian there. So without wasting much time, I just want to go into my presentation. And of course, at the end of the presentation, we can have some more opportunity to engage and to talk about some of these important topics that have been brought up today. So going into the crux of the matter, if you look at the Nigerian, I think Mr. Adeyemi was talking about the energy mix earlier on. Of course, we know the oil and gas contribute about 80% to our energy production, energy generation in Nigeria. And of course, hydropower maybe for about 14%. And renewable, at this point, you can't really find a figure for it because it is still growing. It's really low. And the only reason I believe we have, renewable growing in Nigeria is because of the epileptic, power supply, especially in the urban centers where you would expect that to find, renewable growing in the rural area where you can easily use solar technology and the rest, but that is not so. Even in urban centers like Lagos, Port Harcourt, and the rest of them, you see renewable growing. But of course, I'm sure in the next couple of years, it will grow to a point where you begin to see significant contributions to the Nigerian energy mix. But if we flip that, and then we look at the oil and gas contributions to the Nigerian economy at large, if you look at the fourth quarter 2018 to third quarter 2024 data, you see that oil and gas contribute just about 4 to 9% to the GDP. But then when you look at the government revenue, the contribution to government revenue is about 65%, and of course to our foreign exchange honey is about 88%. Now, earlier on we listened to a talk where an optimism was kind of expressed that the oil and gas can contribute even more, especially if all the NAPE member here just go out and start drill and produce more oil. Of course, we will have much larger contribution to the GDP, to the government revenue, and of course to the foreign exchange honey. But this is the point here. The journey to our energy future, to secure energy future, is a long one. And I think a lot of things from the previous presentations have actually alluded to that. It's a long one. It's been very slow. And we need to make it very fast. We need to go faster so that we can at least provide. We was talking earlier on, we're the giant of Africa, but of course we can't provide power, we can't provide electricity to the masses that need them. We can't power our industry. And that is really not a good thing, especially if we are called giant of Africa. We should not be, that sleeping giant that we are. We really need to wake up from our slumber and do what is needful and increase, our energy production so that we can at least supply, energy to the teeming population. So there are a lot of things, there are a lot of challenges that are faced, that the oil and gas industry is facing. And but what I would say, because I'm speaking to the topic of building capacity, what I would say is that the solution really is local capacity building in the oil and gas sector. That is the solution for us. So what are the challenges that we face in Nigeria, in Nigerian context? The first is funding issues. Funding and, of course, financial indiscipline is at the heart of some of these problems.
poor research funding. I've been in academia for a while, and of course, I also do some consulting job in the oil and gas industry, was in the oil and gas industry before. And when I compare the way research is funded in other climes and the way we fund research here, you can't, it's totally incomparable. So there's poor research funding, there's poor government policy also, and I will speak to that later before, I'll speak to that poor government policy because it is not, the problem is not so much of the lack of policy, but the implementation of this policy. That seems to be the problem. That seems to be the problem. And of course, poor ability to retain talent. And that's why Mr. Vibero was talking about the need for those in diaspora to really come. Because really, we are losing a lot of people to other countries. You know, you go to Saudi Arabia, you go to US, you go to UK, there are a whole lot of people there doing great things. If we can bring them back here, of course, we will be in a better positions to advance, the oil and gas industry and be able to provide energy to our teeming population. There are two things. Let me go back to that slide. There's something I just wanted to, just to give you a bit of, I will just go through this very quickly, to give you some bit of data about this. When you look at the federal government spending on education as the percentage of GDP from 2012 to 2022, you find out that in 2012, it was just about 0.55% or thereabout. And by 2022, just a period of 10 years, it has declined to about 0.35 or thereabout. And when you also look at the government spending on education as a percentage of its total expenditure from 1960 to 2022 also, you find out that that spending has actually declined from about 6% to about 5%, even though you see a lot of, rise and fall in between the 2 years. So that's one way we can look at this problem, because if government is not really spending on education as they ought to, of course, that will affect the capacity to really develop our ability to develop local capacity, our ability to innovate, and on like that. There's a whole lot of problem around that, and we really need to look at that. The other thing I want to talk about, which is very important, especially when we're talking about building local capacity, especially in the oil and gas industry, is if you look at the WIPO report on Global Innovation Index in 2024 and 2025, Nigeria was ranked very low, very, very low in terms of innovation. And if you kind of juxtapose that, if you place that side by side with the fact that we're not really spending much on education, because at the end of the day, if you look at the education sector, especially the university, that is the center of innovation. That is where innovation is produced. That's where we produce knowledge. That's where we train talent. And that's where, that's how we can link academia to the industry and to government, because there really has to be a very strong partnership with these three entities for us to become a global center of innovation. And we really need to get there if we must advance the cause of the oil and gas industry in this nation. And going forward, I just want to go deeper into this. There are about 7 pillars. When the WIPO were doing this report, Global Innovation Index, there were 7 pillars that were actually looked at and categorized into 2 broad categories. The first is Innovation Input Sub-Index, and the second one is the Innovation Output Sub-Index. Now, when you look at the first one, the Input Sub-Index, you have things like institutions, human capital and research, infrastructure, market sophistication, business sophistication. And then the Innovation Output Sub-Index, you have knowledge and technology outputs, and of course, you have creative output. And now, when you look at Nigeria and you compare Nigerian performance to a country like Ghana, to country like Cote d'Ivoire, Cameroon, Togo, and Benin, some of those countries that are in the West African sub-region here, you will see that Nigerian perform really poorly in that, especially when you look at the overall index. Nigeria, okay, performed better than many of those countries, but of course, performed, it was below Ghana. Now, when you look at some of the pillars, the institution, the human capital, and research, where I really want to focus, because what I'm looking at here is developing human capital. And without human capital, it's really, really going to be difficult for us to take forward the oil and gas industry. It's going to be difficult. And so we really need to look at all this area very urgently. I will also quickly just go through this. There are key agencies driving the local capacity building in Nigeria. I'm sure many of you will have heard about PTDF. PTDF established in 1973, and their main objective is actually to develop human capacity in Nigeria oil and gas sector. And of course, Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board, and of course, MEDAN. These are agencies. The question is, how are these agencies driving forward the human capacity development to support the Nigerian oil and gas industry, to take the oil and gas industry to the next level? I will just run through some of the things that they kind of managed to do. For instance, PTDF has committed a lot of money to training Nigerians abroad. And one of the things that I've always been an advocate, I have to say here, I raised up my hand. I actually got a scholarship from PTDF way back in 2000 or something to study. So I know the story. I know the story of the agency. And some people might say, oh, but you got it. So why are you advocating for everything, for a shift in the approach that PTDF uses? But the point is that we are now at a stage in our journey as a nation that we must focus on ourselves. We must focus on what we can do, and that is the whole talk about local capacity development. And we have always been, talking about PTDF focusing more on developing the Nigerian university to transform them into center of excellence, center of innovation that can attract even foreign students. I think in the way we used to attract foreign students way back in the 80s, in the 70s. And then the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board, they are also doing a lot in this space, especially in trying to develop local capacity, especially within the Nigerians in the supply chain area. The SMEDAN, there's something I need to talk about. SMEDAN is not really active in the oil and gas industry. I think they are more active in the textile, but their objective is also to kind of develop local capacity, especially for SMEs. And when you look at the oil and gas industry, we have been talking about divestment and the rest. And many of the oil and gas companies operating in Nigeria today have mostly very medium scale, small scale kind of company. And you begin to wonder, why is it that the SMEDAN is not really active in the oil and gas industry, given this part, but it's something we can kind of discuss later, or something we just need to take to the government and see how they can also support, especially what PTDF and, of course, Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board are doing. So quickly, we need to look at lessons from other countries that have similar experience with us. Countries like Norway, countries like Saudi Arabia, countries like Angola. If you look at Norway, just like Nigeria, they also have a national oil company, Statoil, now Equinor. But of course, they also have regulators who regulate, especially who are vested with the responsibility to drive the local capacity development, just like Nigeria. But the difference between Norway, especially Saudi Arabia and Nigeria, is there is less interference in their commercial activities by the government. very little political interference in their activity. And I don't have that information, but I do know that sometimes, especially for our national oil companies, there may well be some bit of interference here and there. And if we continue to have that, it's going to be really difficult to take, the local capacity effort and advance the local capacity effort and take us to a point where we can beat our chest and say, yes, we have achieved our goals. So what is the way forward? This is really where I'm going. What is the way forward? What can we do? What can we do? I said earlier on, we need partnership, very strong partnership between the industry, which of course you represent here, strong partnership between the industry, the government, and of course, to drive the local capacity. And I remember way back, Shell used to have this intensive, they used to call it Shell intensive training or something. I think it was started 1998 or thereabout, and I was ended around 2009 or thereabout. And a lot of Nigerians were actually trained. One aspect of that scheme that I think we can turn around to really advance the course of what we want to achieve in the present time is using the Nigerian university, because most of those training were actually delivered by foreign university. And so that is what we can turn around. So graduate training is very, very important, very, very important, supported by the higher education sector here in Nigeria, not overseas. And of course, we need to guarantee this training employment after their training, because if you are training people and there is no employment to continue to do what they are doing, it's going to be really difficult. Then we also can do what I call the National Apprenticeship Scheme. This is what they do, especially in other climes, to train young people and to allow them the opportunity to, to receive education and to work at the same time. And by so doing, they have the best of two worlds, learning and working. And that is how you can accelerate development of talent. Of course, policy implementation is important. I said earlier on, it is not the problem of policy is not that we don't have the policy there. There are policy, very, very good policy that are out there to drive the oil and gas industry, but the implementation of such policy is poor. And I advocate that we have what I call a policy monitoring and implementation kind of agency that can monitor implementation of policy across the board, not just in the oil and gas industry, but also in other industries, just to be able to drive the oil and gas objective of building local capacity. And more importantly, research and innovation. That partnership is important. We need to partner with the higher education sector. We need to, the government, the higher education sector, and of course the industry to be able to drive this forward. And if we are able to do this, I'm very, very sure we will be repositioning the industry to be able to manage the challenges that lay ahead of us, especially in the area of human capacity development. And so that's what I want to talk about. I'm not just going to do through this conclusion. Some of the things that I've talked about are just the ones summarized here. And just a quick one before I leave the podium. There's a lot that we can do as an industry. I kind of like the challenge that Mr. David Barrow, put forward. It challenged you as an organization, as an industry, to explore more. And I would challenge you further. You can explore more, you can extend that activity to other, energy for energy carrier fuel like hydrogen, for instance. We've seen in Europe, there's a whole lot going on in hydrogen space in Europe, even in America. There's a lot of exploration going on. In fact, in Spain, just some few, there was a discovery of large hydrogen reserve. I'm not talking about blue hydrogen, green hydrogen, from electrolysis. I'm talking about hydrogen reserve. And we have to begin to challenge ourselves. Yes, oil and gas is important for us, but we can, we can extend the horizon. We can go deeper, and we can begin to look at hydrogen also. And I'm sure if we get to that point, we will be able to generate enough power to, light up our cities, to power our industry, and to take Nigeria to the next level. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Benga Oliemi. Talking to us there on how local capacity can enhance the future of exploration in Nigeria. Thank you very much. So moving on from him, we're going to our next sub-theme speaker. Please give him one more round of applause. Thank you. Leveraging the Petroleum Industry Act as a catalyst for energy security and sustainable energy strategy. Our keynote speaker touched the PIA and why we should not be in a hurry to flip it the way it is. Let's have a conversation around the PIA now. As our next speaker is a seasoned energy sector professional that has over 20 years of experience advising oil and gas clients around the world, and currently leads McKinsey's West Africa Energy practice and is based in Lagos. Again, consult the brochure with you and learn a bit more about our speakers. Welcome with me, Oliver Onyekweli.
All right. Thank you very much. And actually a big thank you for NAPE for inviting myself and my firm to give our perspective on our sector, and a very wonderful and inspiring opening keynote from Mr. Adeyemi Barrow. I'm here to talk about the PIA and the role the PIA plays catalyzing our energy sector. But I'm also going to set the stage a little bit too, whereas our starting point now. And I think then we'll look at a little bit, what are the opportunities, but also the risks, because I think we're also in a moment of risk as well. Maybe just to look at the picture, I think our keynote touched on the scale of the opportunity, and I think sometimes we lose sight of that, right? We are truly one of the most blessed basins in the world. You look at our oil reserves, 37 billion barrels, our gas reserves, 210 thereabouts, and I think it was even insinuated, and I think we all know as explorationists in the room that there's maybe more there, quite a bit more. Maybe we are in Qatar territory in terms of what's available to us for gas. But the reality is also that, it's one thing to have the subsurface, but it's another thing to think about what it takes to get it out of the ground. And I wanted to just set the table because here you can see one of the challenges is that we're more expensive, quite a bit more. What we've shown here is a benchmark on OPEX, on UOC. We've normalized it. This is some of the firm's research that we've done around the world, and we've looked at our competing basins. And guess what? We're about 40% more costly on a UOC basis than peer basins. By the way, this is normalized. So we've looked at reservoir complexity. We've looked at other we've tried to standardize age of the resources as well. And we've stripped out some of the idiosyncratic parts of our own basin, including security. So by the way, this doesn't include security, right? We're just more expensive. And by the way, this is just OPEX. I think it's useful to know, if I now turn to projects and we look at projects, this story is not different. In fact, it's even more challenging. We looked at 20 sample projects in Nigeria across onshore and shallow, and we found out that projects in Nigeria tend to be 30 to 50% more costly. We see cost overrun on initial project budget and schedule delay. up to 100% schedule delay on projects. And as we know, if you have experiencing delay on projects coming on stream, that goes right to NPV. And so adding the cost premium, we also see that we're more carbon intensive as well. This is another of our carbon benchmarks. We've looked at the intensiveness of our oil and gas industry relative to the rest of the world, and we're about 80% more carbon intensive. A lot of that is due to gas. We know that we flare a lot of gas in our nation, which is an opportunity, right? Because we don't have the infrastructure to tie in all the reservoirs and all the gas, we end up flaring it. And I just speak to that because, again, cost and carbon, and I think maybe our next speaker will talk more about it from a financing standpoint, but the reality is that those are the two things that are driving access to capital these days, and so we need to be mindful. And there is a call to action for the operators in the room to think through how do we reduce those UOCs and how do we operate in a way that is, decarbonizing our existing footprint to the greatest extent possible. And so, all that to say, right, is it's all translated, I think, into the picture you see here. We put together a little bit of an analysis here. What you see is CapEx spend across the IOCs. By the way, this is the IOCs only that are operating in Nigeria. And we wanted to see how does the spend in Nigeria compare to their portfolios outside. And what you can see is that, we've notched up a little bit. We've had, thank God, some FIDs in the last little while. We had the HI project 2-3 weeks ago, and Bonga North, that's helped us notch up, but we're still well below, the leading pack, right? Guyana, US, UAE. And I think you can see the effects, for example, of a Guyana where, there's quite an aggressive fiscal regime in place there that has really driven investment dollars to that jurisdiction. And if we see this type of, CapEx deployment in Nigeria, we run the risk of potentially stranded reserves, right? And this is exactly what our keynote speaker tried to highlight at the beginning of the conversation. I think he had 90 years, I have 150. I guess it depends on the number of reserves that you look at. But this all comes to naught if we're not able to, deploy the capital and bring the product out of the ground. And also, this kind of falls into a little bit the opportunity that we have domestically, right? And I'll talk about this more in a minute, but there's a huge opportunity for gas, and the PIA has really made gas at the center of our policy, of our national energy policy. And actually, the demand for gas, if you look ahead into the future, today, like 70% of the gas or thereabout is actually just exported directly out, and LNG and WAGP. 30% of it is here at home. Most of that goes to power. But if you actually fast forward to 2030, we've actually looked a lot at the numbers, and that picture switches. And what you see is a significant domestic demand for gas in our country, at home. Gas for industry, gas to commercial, right? Gas for power. And that's important because if we look at some of the destination markets for our gas today, some of those destination markets may be more challenging, right? In Europe, we will have regulation, CBAM, that's the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, which does put quite some pressure on, decarbonized shipments. Otherwise, you incur a penalty. You receive a cost, you're a higher cost provider, right? And so we need to think about the opportunities for our gas at home, which of course requires infrastructure build out. So the PIA, right? I think maybe to turn to the topic, the PIA. So I think we can't understate the impact, right, that it's had. And I just wanted to at least recognize that. I think it's important. I think big shifts that we saw, right, was, installation of the two regulators, the NUPRC and the NMDPRA. Obviously important to keep roles clear so that investors understand, the domain of regulation across the value chain. We saw the fiscal framework reformed, including a unification, modernization of tax, a shift to profit-based tax, shifting the tax base as well as royalties driven by production and to some extent revenue, to pricing, excuse me. And then of course the commercialization of NNPC was an important, lever to a more efficient partner, right? A more disciplined partner. We talked, I think, a little bit at the beginning of the conversation around host communities and what you see. I think Energia, I think you spoke about the contribution that you all are making, your 3%, as a way to really drive the social license to operate, right? We have to be meaningful contributors in our communities. I spoke about the gas piece, and I'm going to talk about that a bit more. I'm going to just give some real examples of that. But again, it's part of our journey. By the way, it's funny, our firm, we used to talk about gas as a transition fuel. But recently, we've now started saying gas as a destination fuel. Can you imagine? I couldn't stand up here 2 years ago and talk like that. The environment has fundamentally shifted. Even, you talked about oil. Oil is here to stay. We used to talk about peak oil. We don't talk about peak oil, we talk about oil plateau. So yes, we will be bringing on new fuel sources, but we'll still see a relatively steady demand for oil in the future. The question is, which of the basins are going to be the ones that provide it? And those are going to be the basins that are the ones that can compete on a UOC basis so that we can fill that demand, and they're going to be the ones that are able to do so in as decarbonized a manner as possible. And which speaks to the environmental aspect I talked about. The DNA was another big part of the PIA. And then just a streamlined and modernized way to think about licensing, right? With a little more flexibility in the contract structures. So what has that done, right? And I think just to make it real, I think it's done a lot, right? I think we've tried to show a little bit the trajectory, and what an exciting trajectory our country is on. I can't tell you, I've had the benefit of visiting a few different countries over the last couple of months, and whenever anyone hears that I'm in Nigeria, they always want to talk. They say, what's going on over there? What is going on that is creating so much excitement and buzz about your basin? And you can see it. We talked about production uptime. You've got the likes of Renaissance. They're here in the room. I mean, production up into the 220, maybe 240, I don't know. It's high. 240,000 barrels a day, opening up production, availability on the pipelines. It's not just Renaissance. We've got Seplat in the room. These are the custodians of our nation's resources. They're under tremendous pressure. These people are getting phone calls from NUPRC and NNPC every day. Where's production? How do you increase production? You can see the picture. It's going up. The minister has set a target of 3 million barrels a day. It's a high target, but we're working our way toward it. Rig counts, if we think about rig counts as almost a bellwether of our industry, we're at almost 70. I think we're at 69 rigs in the country as of this month, ready to be deployed against workovers and drilling. This is an exciting basin to be in. This is the gas picture I talked about, but I want to make it real to you. I want to make it real so you see the picture. The picture is actually, without being dramatic, I almost call it a gas crisis. So whenever anyone talks about we should be exporting more gas, yes, we should, but we have a domestic crisis here at home. We have so much gas demand that is pent up. This picture shows you what 2030 looks like. By the way, 2030 gas supply looks at all the gas reserves that have taken FID, plus projects that have field plans, okay? And it compares it to demand, and these are demand projects that have FID. These could be fertilizer plants, gas to power projects that have FID are on the books to be done. You can see almost a 10 BCF per day gap that needs to come forward, needs to be produced and put into the market, and it's going to require some major shifts, right? We talked about one at the beginning. We have to have an honest conversation about gas pricing, because at the end of the day, if you're sitting in the boardroom, you're not going to bring the gas out if you can't earn a reasonable return on your investment or even cover your CapEx and OpEx. And we've seen movement in the, it's been a bit sporadic. In 2004, we saw an uptick in the domestic, base price. It went down again for this year. We now need to see what's going to happen in 2026, but investors are watching. we've got also good news around approvals to settle the gas. By the way, not just gas, the power sector arrears. We have a lot of arrears. There's almost 5 trillion naira of debt that's built up. And progress continues on our critical infrastructure. OB3 is at around somewhere in the 80s. Excuse me, OB3 is closer than that. OB3 is in the 90, 95, 96%. It's AKK that's in the 80s. And of course, ongoing initiatives to improve power sector liquidity. We probably may see at some point an increase in tariff again. We saw the Band-Aid tariff and what that did, and it did improve recovery in the sector, but it's not enough. It's still not a cost-reflective sector. Okay, these are the divestitures. I'm not going to speak much to them. I think we've seen them all before, but what I wanted to show is what I hope is a pretty inspiring picture. Look at this. Look at where we are now. The light blue line represents the IOCs right here. You can't see it. And then the dark blue line shows the independents. And for the first time, independent production has met and is beginning to exceed that of the IOCs. What an amazing picture that is, and it speaks to the changing of the guard and the inheritance of the basin by our national independence. And I think when you think about the PIA, and I mean, you know, the PIA itself has been supplemented by a series of executive orders. We know what they are, but I think it's useful to just call out that, you know, there are real signs of progress, right? The FIDs is where the proof is in the pudding, you know? When people start making real investment decisions and committing capital, and that's what we begin to see. So I just want to call out briefly before I step off stage, lots of good momentum. I think investors have seen, they felt, you know, they've seen this PIA, they've seen this stability. We've been waiting for it for years. It's, you know, it helped remove the overhang on investment. Subsequent executive orders unlocked further investment. But, you know, we can't lose sight on a few things. One is around implementation. I think Professor Banger, you spoke about that. It's only as good as the implementation, right? And we've got many, many regulations that are still, you know, in draft form. And it creates uncertainty for investors because you now need to look at the PIA, you need to look at the draft regulations, and you're trying to interpret, right? And so there does need to be a faster implementation of the regulations on the books in order to get folks comfortable. The other thing I want to highlight is around instability, right? And here we know there's a proposed amendment that's come up. And these kinds of things, we know the PIA is going to evolve over time. That's not in question. I think it's when you start to see really fundamental shifts that investors start getting worried. And I can tell you, I've sat in a room with some very large investors who get really nervous when they hear things around like this, right? Where you're having a combination of the concessionaire with the regulator. It creates uncertainty around what does that mean? Is it a conflict of interest? These are the questions that get raised. And when you're in an environment, especially on the deep water, where you're putting, you know, multi-billion-dollar projects together with a 20-year life, you know, you need stability, you need predictability. So I think the call to action here is around how do we make incremental improvements to what we already have that doesn't shake up investors too much. And I think the third and final thing I'll just call out is, you know, value erosion. There's been a lot of value addition in the PIA, but we worry when you start to see certain elements begin to kind of chip away at what the PIA has brought, you know, and so it's important to keep in mind the full picture. And I just talked briefly about regulatory overlap as well. Important to know who does what, right? And in the proposed amendments, we're starting to see, you know, another conversion toward shared responsibility, which also creates confusion. So just to wrap it up, and maybe just one final thing, right? I was speaking to one of the majors the other day, one of the very senior leaders from outside Nigeria. And sometimes it's nice to hear the voice from outside Nigeria. And a guy said, he said, you know, there's nowhere else where we've got a $50 billion deep water CapEx funnel ready to go like Nigeria. So in some sense, it's about getting out of our own way and allowing these investments to come forward. And to do that, it's again, these three things. It's how do we prevent the erosion of the value that the PIA has already created? And how do we ensure that there's transparency? And the word they continue to use is predictability, 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 stability. They're the same words over and over. And of course, accelerating the pace of implementation. My time is up. We'll talk more about this at the panel.
Thank you very much, Oliver Onyekweli is a partner McKinsey & Company, talking to us there about the PIA and why investors will cringe when you want to make certain spontaneous changes that affect sanctity of contract. Thank you very much. Please give him another round of applause. Our next speaker is experience in investment banking, project financing, investment management, risk management, and portfolio management, with nearly 2 decades of experience in the financial services sector. She leads origination, structuring, and execution of transactions in the energy resources sector in oil, gas, mining, and associated infrastructure, which includes client coverage, transaction origination, negotiation, and execution of transactions for her current employer. Please welcome with me the Vice President for Africa Finance Corporation, Taiwo Okwo.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really delighted to be here today, to be in the midst of industry veterans, Mr. Dr. Lai Fatino, Mr. Adeyemi Bero, and everybody here. It's a really delight to share my perspective. I think it's always a tough gig to talk about finance because everybody, when I meet people, they automatically assume, when are you going to write a check? I've sent you the teaser. What do you need me to do? Have you gone to your investment committee, etc.? But I think the reality is that finance is a key enabler. It's critical to be able to unlock hydrocarbon resources. But for you to be able to access that finance, a lot of elements need to be in place for it to happen. So I'm going to start off by speaking about Africa Finance Corporation. So AFC, I'm a Vice President in Investments and Energy Resources. For those not familiar with AFC, it's a development finance institution, was set up in 2007 to be a catalyst for infrastructure development and growth on the continent. So what does that mean exactly? We've spoken about, creating value from our hydrocarbon resources. Whether we like it or not, oil is here to stay. And I think I'm really proud to work in this sector despite the emerging theme around energy transition, renewables, etc. So what we do is investing in oil and gas investments all across the continent. So where I sit, I have the benefit of seeing opportunities all across Africa, Nigeria, Angola, Senegal. Everywhere you have a really good basins, we look at it. But for me, it's more exciting. Nigeria is more exciting at the moment. I'm seeing opportunities in Nigeria compared to other sectors, so that's good news. So just to close off on what I do, we're catalysts for growth. We invest in project development, we invest in project finance, debt and equity. And I think what we also do is invest in ecosystem because we want to be able to be a catalyst for infrastructure on the continent. So I'm going to borrow some of the comments or remarks made by Oliver and set the tone in terms of where we are in the oil and gas space. On the left-hand side, you can see the chart that the landscape is changing, but Africa still remains dominated by fossil fuel, and that's going to continue. For us to be able to reduce the energy deficit on the continent and increase energy supply. And on the right-hand side, you can see that for us to be able to meet all these objectives, significant amount of capital is needed. There is a big disconnect in terms of the available capital and the capital that's required to meet the energy supply. But what is the problem? And why are we not seeing enough financing coming into the sector? I think a lot of it comes down to being very export-oriented. Our keynote speaker made a mention that we need to make a shift from being export-oriented to more, creating more value, retaining more value on the continent, and that's what we focused on. The other aspect is also around lack of investment in the midstream sector and the downstream sector. So maybe to be more practical, I promise I'm going to be very practical in my presentation. When we see opportunities and it's really focused mostly on the upstream, capturing value, getting the resource out, it doesn't get me excited, to be honest. I want to be able to see a picture that depicts how you're creating value from the upstream, what additional investments are you looking into the midstream, and what is happening on the downstream. Essentially, what that does for us is being able to mitigate the risk and create a captive revenue source and capture the cash flows for the investment. So it's important that if we want to get to 2 million barrels of production, 3 million barrels, 2.5, whatever the objectives are, we need to focus on the other aspects of the value chain in the sector. So just moving on to this slide very quickly, I talk about why are we not having a lot of money coming into the sector. So despite the significant amount of resources that we have, I think a lot of our panelists have spoken about it, there's still a very high level of perceived risk of investing in Nigeria, for example. So without reducing that risk or changing the narrative, it's very difficult to attract capital in the sector. The other aspect is, from where I sit and having a lot of interaction with people, more people want to invest in oil and gas sector. That's a great thing. I'm seeing reemergence of financial institutions who left the sector many years ago coming back. We're also seeing the reemergence of financial institutions from the Middle East even investing in Nigeria. They are even looking to take more bigger size investments in a syndicate. But I guess you probably wonder, that doesn't apply to everybody because they're looking for less risky type investments, operational type of projects. So what do we need to do then to create more opportunities in early stage investments? So I think that's a lot of things that we need to resolve as well. So I'm just going to speak to our approach to the energy sector. Like I said, we are one of the institutions that's still very invested in energy sector. A number of our peers are not so interested, or they left the sector, but they're now playing catch up. But we are still very interested because we understand the criticality of financing to Africa's oil and gas. So where do we play? I'll be expecting a lot of questions and comments after the presentation. So where does AFC play? We focus on asset growth, so financing acquisitions from IOCs. We've seen a lot of that very recently in Nigeria, in Angola, a lot of lessons learned that can be applied. We also focus on investment expansion as well. So when I see an opportunity, I want to understand the scalability of that investment. It's not just about today. What is the strategy? What is the plan to go from your current level of production to your future production? And how is that contributing to the national quota, so to say? The reason I say that is because we are a development finance institution. We're developmental focused. So we want to know what the value of a capital we are deploying is going to do to the economy. Decarbonization as well. When we look at a project, in order to attract capital from the likes of us and other DFIs, we want to understand what your strategy is around producing less emission. right? Are you instituting renewable projects to ensure that you have less emission? What are some of the ENS initiatives that you're putting into your, to your strategy to ensure that you have less gas flaring, etc.? I don't expect you to have all this in day one. It's a journey, and we typically work with sponsors and operators to get to that journey. The other aspect is on diversification as well. I spoke on the last slide about focusing on the midstream sector. What is the infrastructure that's there? What are the alternatives to the current infrastructure? And who are you looking to partner with to create that really alternative infrastructure to ensure that your project is secure on a long-term basis? And I think the final point is on the hedging. One of our speakers spoke about volatility in the sector. Whether you like it or not, crude, the oil price is susceptible to geopolitics and a lot of other factors. So we want to ensure that there is a mechanism in place to protect you from a downside when it happens. So AFC is able to provide some of those financial instruments as well. So the question, to the theme of the presentation, how can we enable more capital to come into the sector? When I was thinking about this, I thought the real question should be, how can you, accelerate more investment in the sector? That's what we need. We need more money to come into the sector, right? To increase production, to support development, and bring more projects online. So the slide focuses on 4 topics, and I'll just go through each of them one by one. I think the first one is on diversified funding sources. This is very important because, a lot of things we've seen at the moment is that sponsors approach projects, they would put together a financing source, and we realize that when they come to us as a financier, there is a gap. So we want to understand how that gap is going to be met. Whether I would like it or not, a lender is conservative. We're not going to benefit from the upside in your business, okay? So we want to ensure that to a large extent, our capital is protected. So when there's a funding gap, we want to understand how the sponsors are going to be able to meet that funding gap, and also ensure that that source of capital is there to support the project as it goes through the transition phase. The other important thing around capital is also in looking beyond the traditional sources of funding. I want to give example, like Angola. We've seen Sonangol, the national oil company, expand its funding sources by divesting a lot of its stakes in a lot of projects, and it was doing that for years. And through that, it's been able to tap into the capital markets on an annual basis. Over the last 15 years, they'll come to market and raise about 2 billion, 1.5 billion to be able to invest in projects and expand production. I think that's something that Nigeria as a country needs to take a lot of lessons from if we want to get to the target production level. I think the other good news around funding sources is that there's a lot of positives, like I said. We've seen Haradel come to market very recently in an IPO. So that to me shows that with a good track record and a good profile of being able to deliver, you can actually tap into alternative sources of funding. So I think the call to action here is that as you look to develop your project on the long-term basis, it's important that you get the foundations right, you deliver on what you say you're going to do, and then financiers will naturally be attracted to you and willing to work with you. The second point around bringing more capital into the sector, if we're going to meet our production, is around mitigating operational risk. I think in Oliver's presentation, you spoke about how comparable we are to other locations. We are very expensive, whether we like it or not. So how do we bring that down to ensure that the operating model is more stable when there's a downside, challenges as well. So one of the ways we can do that, I believe, in my experience, is strengthening the governance and risk frameworks. When we interact with, I'll just keep talking while that comes back on. Okay. So when we interact with sponsors looking to develop their projects, we want to see that you're in it for the long haul. What is your governance and operating framework, right? Because naturally, if you don't have it, in the right way, there's will be a natural aversion to how you're going to operate the business. So, important that you can demonstrate that there is a framework in place to ensure that you're managing your project very, very well. The third point, to enable more capital to come into, to the sector and into projects around technology. I think our keynote speaker mentioned that as well, that, the industry is changing. The industry, which was a bedrock of modern civilization, is going through a transition, whether we like it or not. But how do we, in the country, adapt to that technology and take advantage of it? There clearly benefits of technology, because if you deploy it very well, you can reduce your operating costs, bring those numbers down, and ultimately improve your operational efficiency. But I think a lot can be said about embracing technology, but without the building blocks, it's a challenge. Do we have the right skill sets to embrace the technology? I think we still have a long way to go. But I think I'm always very solution-oriented. What we can do is to work with other jurisdictions to leverage on their knowledge base. Why can't we do that? Why do we have to start from scratch? Because if we do start from scratch, then it's going to take us a really long time, and we're going to be talking about the same thing in 2035. And I clearly don't want to be talking about the same challenges in 10 years' time. So leveraging technology in the sector is very important. Whether you are, a new EMP company, whether you're a mid-sized EMP company, I think a lot can be done through leveraging technology and working alongside the more experienced players. The final point on how to attract the very limited capital is developing an approach which is around integrated energy value chain. I think historically we haven't done that very well, but if we want to get to where we want to get to, it's important that right from the conception stage of your project, you need to be thinking about developing an integrated value chain. At AFC, we worked with, I think there are some examples, which is Walter Smith, I think it's part of Aradel. I can speak freely in the room. So we supported the business through financing the modular refinery. But I think what was attractive to us was that we knew they had the business plan to eventually go up the upstream sector. We're working with them to support them through the developing upstream projects. But to me, what was encouraging is that when you have the significant dip in the oil price, or the pipelines are down because of Nigeria challenges, they were one of the operators that were still able to produce, generate cash flows, meet their financial obligations, and they continue to be trusted. That's the value you gain from having an integrated value chain. That's something we continue to advocate for when we engage with sponsors, because ultimately you want to develop a sustainable business model, retain value in country as opposed to being fully export focused. I think what that ultimately leads to is having a diversified business model. There are many examples of that. You see Seplat, it's not only an EAP company, you become a midstream company. There's a certain aspect of downstream to what they're trying to do. I mean, even Renaissance as well, I believe part of their business strategy is to become more diversified across the value chain. This message, I mean, in closing, I think this message is very important because when I look at successful oil and gas companies all across the world or even across the continent, being more diversified is what's going to keep you around for the long haul. And you don't even need to become, I don't know, a $1 billion company today. But putting those building blocks in place to become a diversified business model is what's going to enable you to attract a significant amount of capital to develop your project. So, I mean, in conclusion, I promised to spend less than the 15 minutes. I think in conclusion, my key message is that attracting capital into the Nigerian oil and gas sector is multifaceted. We need to embrace technology, digitization. We need to diversify funding sources and look beyond the traditional method, because the traditional method is not going to get us there. There's a lot of capital that needs to be raised. And I think on the closing point is that always have in the back of your mind the ethos of sustainability, because what we're trying to do is to achieve economic growth. So if you have a business model that is built on the foundation of digitization, social responsibility, someone spoke about that, then you are well placed to be able to attract more capital for your business. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Taiwo Okwo, Vice President, Investments, Africa Finance Corporation there, working us through financing the Nigerian oil and gas sector, overcoming financing barriers and exploring new investment frontiers. Of course, we've taken the presentation on the central theme for the pre-conference workshop. We've looked at what role local content can play. We've looked at why we should have the PIA and use it to our betterment rather than destruction. We've also looked at how, after all the grammar has been spoken, without the money, every barrel of oil will be in the ground. So we've rounded that off with a bit of money conversation. Now, it's time for us to get into the panel. But before we get into the panel, we want to drill some tea and coffee, because our ideas have found some tea and coffee in this room. Mr. Okwo and Mr. Onyekwen, can you all please come back on stage? Please give them a round of applause as they make their way back on stage. They will be joined by two titans of our industry. First off is a pioneering entrepreneur and thought leader in our energy sector, a distinguished geologist, a pioneering entrepreneur, and a highly respected thought leader in this industry, whose career spans 5 decades and has been at the forefront of transformation of the Nigerian energy landscape, advocating for emergence and empowerment of indigenous operators in the exploration and production sector. He is one of the principal reasons that we are here, acknowledged in the industry with multiple awards celebrating his remarkable contribution. Please welcome the chairman, Renaissance Africa Energy Company Limited, Dr. Lai Patono F. Nabi. Joining them as well is one of the very few industry experts who can boast of being both operator, contractor, consultant, and regulator, all in one lifetime of working in this industry for over 4 decades. His multifaceted experience stands him out as one of the most renowned geoscientists in this industry. A past president and fellow of our association. Please welcome the chairman of Energia Limited, Mr. George Osahom F. NAPE. He's worked with NMPC, he's been a consultant, he's an entrepreneur in the industry. He was also a regulator as a former DPR director. So yes, he's one of the few experts who can boast of that. One more time, please, a round of applause for him. If anybody ever, if you're in a conversation and people are wondering, how did Richmond get into the oil and gas industry? Just tell them to ask Oga George or so. He opened the door for Richmond. He doesn't like me saying it, but I'll keep saying it. I'll keep saying it. All right? So, to help us drive the conversation, it's not every time you find a geoscientist whose idea is not only finding oil and gas, is also finding facts, data, and the correct information where they are and helping apply them how they can help grow this industry. He's a petroleum geologist and energy journalist that has 42 years postgraduate experience, 20 of them spent as geoscientists with Chevron, an American oil and gas giant. But today, he is a multiple award-winning writer, author, and many more. Please welcome publisher Africa Oil and Gas Report, Mr. Tony Akiosho F. NAPE, our moderator. And our keynote speaker. And our keynote speaker, of course, you know, the tradition with this event is when you finish your keynote, you will not join the panel. But because of his experience, and I think the committee was spot on, when you listen to him, the foundation he laid, you will agree with the committee that we need to have him here on this panel and join in the conversation that the panel is about to have. Hence, he's making his second missionary journey to this stage today. Let's welcome back Mr. Demola Adeyemi Barrow.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call the indulgence of some of the pioneers of the industry in the room. So all protocols observed. Mr. Jim Orife, good morning. And all other protocols observed. I don't need to mention anybody after you. So that's the idea. We've been doing this for 35 years. This is the 35th pre-conference workshop. The NAPE conference up until 1991 was strictly a technical affair. It was a continuing education series sort of thing where most of the conversations had to do largely with a bunch of earth scientists sharing experience, sharing technical knowledge. And so those small rooms around were the key places where the conference happened. Then Reverend Oshewa came and said, okay, we understand the subsurface, but we've always been accused of being an enclave industry. And this industry has never had a clear line of sight to the overall national economy. We need something that we share with the rest of the economy. And that's how the pre-conference workshop started. So this is the 35th. That's number one. The second thing is that we also, of course, prior to that, the NAPE has always been part of the larger conversation of the Nigerian economy, regardless of whether we're technical or not. Even before that, 1991, it's contributed to all of those policy ideas, especially, for example, when the DPR began to look at the deep water concessions, it was at NAPE that it announced it. And, so even prior to 1991, but I needed to put that on record, Now, the second thing is that perhaps because we consider that idea that we are the key knowledge producer for the technical aspect of the oil industry, we thought that the first NAPE conference after the takeover, because it was in March that the indigenous entrepreneurs completely took over the industry. The next NAPE conference, which is this, we needed to come and sit down and evaluate what had happened. Are we going to really actually run this industry, or are we going to run it to the ground? That is the reason why you had a keynote address from somebody who is himself on the board of governors of OPEC and the chairman of the board of governors of OPEC, and a product of this tendency. Now, it was at NAPE that Professor Jibril Amin said that there was only one company, Nigerian company, outside of the 6 IOCs that produced anything at all in that same 1991. And he said that that company was even a national oil company, the MPDC, delivering roughly 1,000 barrels of oil a day. So he thought that we needed, to have Nigerian companies, and they could come from anywhere. They needed to have run other businesses, So why don't you hand over licenses to these people and encourage them to explore for oil and gas? He was a Napian, Ebio Mashola, that was the former NAPE president, that Mr. Mike Adenuga poached to run Cornwell, which was our first key operating company in the real sense of the word. There had been other Nigerian companies, but they never properly operated, and that's how we started producing, have operating companies that are producing. But that's not where I'm going still. Now, we are here again trying to figure out what it is that has happened despite all of the journey so far. How, in spite of everything, that we're stuck at these volumes, in spite of everything that has been handed over to us. So if we were the ones who insisted that this will happen, why are we not carrying it forward? And that's what this conversation is about. Why do you have 21, 22, 23, 25 companies taking over from 5 companies that were producing roughly 2.5 million barrels, and you are stuck at 1.5 million barrels per day. So I'm going to start the conversation from the very end before I come to the keynoter and ask the one person on this on this panel who has been both a regulator and a commercial, has been in the has been a government worker, and has also been in the private sector. Around 12 years ago, Mr. George Osaon, who was around that time the director of DPR, the precursor of the NUPLC, wondered to somebody privately why that gentleman was so excited about the so-called increasing takeover of Nigerian assets by Nigerian companies. These companies really, do you believe they really can deliver? Now, Mr. George Osaon is chairman of Energia, one of those companies. He is now in Aradel. He's actually followed Mr. Fatono all over the place. Mr. Fatono left Aradel, he went to Aradel after him. I'd like to find out from him what has changed. Let's start the conversation from there.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Atunya Kyushu. I hope I've been heard. Am I being heard?
Not really, not really. Do you want?
Hello? Is it working? Okay.
Can we give volume on Mr. Sahon's mic, technical? You have? Please say something, sir.
Something.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Akyushu. This is actually being put on the spot. About 12, 13 years ago, yes, I did say that. And I don't think it's any different from what I thought would happen. And when you say Nigerian or independent indigenous companies have taken over, I would not like to use the word takeover because we haven't really taken over everything. What we have done is to replace the IOCs in the particular sector, which I call the conventional terrain, that is the onshore and shallow water terrain. And don't forget, one of the things that had plagued my imagination when I was saying that has continued to subsist to today. I like to be anecdotal in my response. One of the companies that started this takeover, they had 3 blocks, 4, 38, and 41. You know who they are. Essentially, they have only one asset in that place. And the name of the asset is named after a city in Delta State. They ran from about 7,500 barrels of oil a day to 78,000 barrels of oil a day. 78 before it started dropping. Now, in the Western Delta, there are a set of blocks that form the second stage of the so-called takeover or FAMI, replacement divestment. And I will name them. From the left, 40, 30, 34, 40, 42, 26. If you look at all those assets put together, they have close to 8 billion barrels of oil. Dr. Fadan can bear me out. Tell me which one of them has any production today, starting from when I was there in 2013, 2014, that has from any of the asset blocks, not fields, anything close to what Seplat did in that small asset in OML 38 till today. And you know why? The same thing I was worried about. Because in the case of Seplat, they were vested with the operatorship. In the case of these other companies, they are still not vested with the operatorship. they talk about joint operatorship program. There's nothing like that. So you are being constrained from doing your best. You are being constrained from doing what you know best to do because somebody is there asking as the gatekeeper and he doesn't have all the technology to do it the way you do it. And besides, you are borrowing money. And like I told Madam, I'm coming to borrow money. She said, no, bring what it takes. Now, if you don't have what it takes, you cannot borrow money. But these people, they don't need your money because they rely on government. It's government. And there's nothing you can do about it. So while you might think I was misplaced in my thinking at that time, fortunately for us, I wish I could show my own slides. Now, when you looked at how the thing evolved, first, Seplat. Second, the second set in the west. Third, you have the swamp in the east. You remember? Then you have the 60s, the 60s, 61, 62, 63 for Oando. Then we started seeing the new set of people starting from the same Seplat in the southeast offshore, 67, 70. Then you have a Renaissance and so on and so forth. Now, where I'm coming from is, if you look at the evolution, the luck we have is that the Renaissance of this world took over from SPDC. Therefore, they can operate. So when you tell me that they literally doubled production within a year, what do you think caused that? So smart. When some of them who are in the same part of the Western Delta I just mentioned couldn't do a thing because of Mr. X. So that is the reason. It is not so much that I was putting a constraint on the abilities of our people to deliver. I was worried about the system that will make it impossible for them to deliver. And that's where we are today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I mean, before you go, and we haven't exactly removed that problem, right? So we're still going to be stuck with it for a while, right? Can you answer that? Yes.
The luck we have is the companies that are coming in, the new set of companies that have just come in, you have the Seplat again, you have Chapao, well, you have Renaissance and so on. They haven't really inherited some of the issues we have in that part. So that's why I'm saying it's a good thing that Renaissance was able to increase production, I mean, more than double in 1 year. That is a record. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, now, I did say that I will come to both Mr. Osanjo and Dr. Fatono first. Two things, because they basically represent the largest institutional memories on this panel. That's number one. Secondly, that, you know, they basically were there on the ground floor, I mean, on the foundation floor when everything was started. So we can all benefit from the so-called, the present is the key to the past that they have. Now, one thing that is forthright about what he said, and I'm going to let this go, I mean, flow very quickly, just before you think that we're rambling. No, we're not. One thing that is very forthright about what he said is the role of the MPDC. He doesn't want to say it, but he was himself MD of MPDC once, you know. So this is a question of, I know that we have a problem. You know, it's the kind of line that you got from the keynoter when he's got to a point who said, look, all of us in the room, in this industry, we haven't exactly moved this thing along. So it's a judgment call day, and I really thank him. What I'm asking is, despite the fact that the other companies are coming in and they can, their own increment, we haven't really tested Renaissance. We don't know what they will do, despite the fact that they have all of it. I'm still going to ask Dr. Fatono whether, you know, there's a way out. But, you know, what exactly should happen now to that, to that situation. Because, let's even assume for any reason that Renaissance and Seplat are not able to deliver the way we need everyone's best to happen. What should be done? Should we find a way of easing off that operatorship and just let these companies operate? But you also know that companies that are not going to deliver will not deliver. There's a company who was just locked up because he can't even pay, despite the fact that he's been producing 44,000 barrels a day for close to a year. What is your solution to that chokehold in that place? Let's deal with that before we then open up the conversation to everybody else. Yes, sir.
Okay, it's a tough one. What are the constraints of these companies that have taken over this operatorship? There are legacy issues you have to think about, which is community issues, it's a legacy issue. Then, of course, decommissioning and abandonment is a legacy issue, in the sense that when you buy or you farm into this asset, you farm into it hook, line, and sinker. That is, as is. You don't have a choice. Compared to what happens in the North Sea, where you can call on the former operator to come and answer to his call, to come and take his rubbish. You can't do that in Nigeria, because once you buy, you've bought, period. That's one. Two, because in some of them where government has said, sorry, you cannot be the operator. You have to operate with this party. And unfortunately, while that would have been easy to sort out, maybe before now, the Oga that I presented before talked about what government is planning with the PIA. If that happens, when you are even bringing the regulator to become a commercial operator, you are making life a lot more difficult. So what should have happened would have been, it's difficult to talk about roles one played because it's irrelevant. Because one of the things that we tried to do was to make sure that the second set of farmers were able to operate on their own. I still remember some of the documents which you even saw, that if this company was able to do this within so period, why don't you allow these other companies to do that? If there is a way by which IPPG, that's Independent Petroleum Producers Group and so on and so forth, can have a discussion with government. Because one of the things I believe is this: in this issue, we have 4 sets of people playing. 1, government. Whether you call that ministry or not, that's not the problem. 2, regulators. 3, operators. And 4, the communities. Now, if there is a way for everybody to realize that the more these guys produce, the better for all of us, then it would be nice for everybody to go together and say, okay, look, what have been the constraints? Use typical empirical information that I've provided. If this company with this tiny field went up to so amount, tell me, OML 30. Those days when you tell us OML 30, we start groping our seats. God, OML 30 is so big. OML 42. For Christ's sake, 6 blocks, 8 billion barrels, something is wrong. Okay. So if there's a way by which all those 4 parties can come together and vest the operatorship, because the man you talked about, he was able to do that. What did he even do? Apart from the fact that he couldn't operate, he even went back and called himself the FTSA to the same government and invested the FTSA on him. That is insider dealing. You don't do that. And that is because of the issues we have. So the nation has to be clear in what he wants to do to ensure that, like the Oga said, ensure that you have production, because without production, you are dead. Just one point before I go. The man from Nigeria did mention something, that they got the Ebendo field estimated at 5 million barrels total reserve. They have produced 60 and still going. That gives you an idea of what he said about the reserves in Nigeria. We're just deceiving ourselves. There's so much in there which we are yet to account for. And that is why a company can go from so to so in so short a time. There's a lot of hope, there's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot to see ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So having dealt, you don't worry, I'll get back to you. But we need to go. We have just 1 hour and we have 40 minutes for this panel. Dr. Fatono, one of the things that I forgot, I'm not very good extempore, in taking the narrative beyond what Professor Jibril Aminu, the architect of local content, Nigerian local content, who actually got us all here in some sense. When he delivered those assets to those non-oil industry types, there was a lot of criticism in the room. One, I'd said this in his presence, so I can say it behind him. Mr. Ben Osuno, who was the first DPR director, he got up right inside his room and said, if you gave a license to a trader, he would deal with it like a trader. The industry professionals were beginning to get worried that the Nigerians that are given the assets weren't actually developing these assets. And that was the thinking, behind the birth of NDEP, Niger Delta. So a bunch of actual professional type, technical and banking, came together and set up that organization, which Dr. Fatono became the pioneer MD of. I'm saying this in order that we can let him provide us a sense of where this is going, because we only know that they've taken over. And when I use the word takeover, Mr. Saon had challenged me. I look at the figures all the time. We saw Oliver's slide. If you saw Oliver's slide, you know that that's his clear takeover. The last time I checked, the 7 deep water fields that, the IOCs are now, have to themselves, produced 408,000 barrels a day in September, right? That's the last figure that NUPRC has produced. We're in November, they haven't published October. Now, 408,000 barrels. Let's assume that Chevron does, onshore and shallow water, because they're the ones that have not sold, right? Let's assume at the most they do 130,000 barrels. Trust me, they are not likely to do much more than that, And let's assume that Total, and this is very unlikely, also do 120,000 barrels. So you're looking at 250 over that 408. So really, these guys are struggling with 600, 660. Now, between SEPNU, that is Mobile Producing Nigeria, and RIAC, that's Renaissance, is 170,000 plus 230,000. That's, 235,000. That's 400, just 2 companies. Right now, the old Seplat itself is roughly 50,000. The base business, which my bond, Mr. George Osaon mentioned. So between those 2 companies, they are roughly 460,000. Already higher than what the deep water guys are doing, which is entirely IOCs. So what's your takeover again? 2 companies are doing that. Heritage is shooting to 60. First CMP is around 60. 44 for Nekonde. That's around, by 4 of them, that's another 200. So the companies, you don't need anything about takeover anymore. And I got from some of these presentations that we had domestic gas that is about 1/3 of export. That's not what the figures that I see. If you're looking at those NUPLC data, we're actually doing, far above 1.5, close to 2, sometimes 2.0, billion standard cubic feet for domestic. That we've gotten that far. So if you get roughly 2.9 to as export and you got 2, I'm not saying it's terrific, but that's how well we're doing in terms of domestic gas. So there's been a takeover, and domestic gas is largely, the Nigerian companies. So let's get back to the conversation again. So what I wanted from Dr. Fatono is this. We didn't know that, I didn't know, Uncle Jim Orife knows, and other people in the room, Alaji Agbapiaka knows, that Dr. Fatono left Shell in 1985. I didn't know. I thought he was, I knew that he went to Shell in 1974. So I used to struggle because he was the one that collected the key from Shell to take over the company, So I used to say that 51 years after I went to work for Shell as a pupil geologist, he went back and took over the company. You can go ahead and clap. But until I read this piece that he delivered in Uganda, that actually he left Shell finally, after Imperial and all that, 40 years ago in 1985. So he deliberately counted what he did it and went and took over the company 40 years exactly after I left it. So what are you going to do with those 11 billion? Why is it so difficult to get to the 300,000 barrels a day that you have promised will be the short term? We need some of these insights in order to get our communique done. Yes.
First of all, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Tony, thank you very much. And George, thanks. And Demola for that brilliant foundation that all of you have given. So, everybody who asked me this same question Tony had asked, we all forget that Renaissance is a 200-day-old baby. And the firepower that is in Renaissance is still to be unleashed, whichever way you look at it. Here's a new company, has inherited 1,700 staff, nearly 3,000 contract staff, asset base, 18 OMLs spread across the Delta. And how many people are in Renaissance? Demola, you can count all of us, maybe 10 of us. So it's a lot of learning to deal with. And our strategy was very simple. Safely receive the company, stabilize the company, and grow the company. I can say in 200 days, we have achieved the first 2 objectives. We have safely received, we have stabilized, because in those 200 days, you have seen production go from 140,000 barrels to 240. You have seen for the first time in 5 years, delivery of gas to Bonny LNG top the 1.9 BCF standard cubic feet per day, past the landmark that even Shell was able to deliver in the last 5 years of its operation. So for a 200-day-old baby, that's an awesome performance. But the best is still to come, because the growth phase of Renaissance is yet to happen. One assurance I can give to you is that we have been blessed. We have a very, very large number of very well-trained workforce. We have managed to benefit from their confidence. Everybody has settled and Mr. Suji told the story of the family friend. The confidence is there, and I am just saying professionally, I see all the indices that allow us to achieve those expectations of you, Tony, as a stakeholder, and not just you, the government, the regulator, the communities, and literally everybody, central bank, everybody has very strong expectations of what this, whether you call it takeover or stepping into somebody else's shoe. But Oliver, thank you very much. I saw the graph today. I did not know that the light blue and the blue side of the graph were almost inching very close to one another. But assuredly, all I can say is tomorrow is going to be better. Thank you.
Thank you. So we were talking about Renaissance, and Mr. Ade Yemibero was shaking his head. He's basically complained being stuck with a panel when he had delivered such a fascinating keynote address. I know he's an extremely busy person, and I'm happy that John Bosco-led NAPE has been committed. I mean, has made the miracle of making it. I need to ask him this question. This is the second time he's saying this at the NAPE gathering. That the A team of he's worried that there's a very poor execution capacity in the oil industry as it is. And that if we're going to increase to the so-called 2.5 or 3 million barrels, we need to up our game in terms of delivering the work. I'm also going to ask Oliver later about the 30% increase, higher in cost that we tend to incur on our projects. But let me ask Mr. Yemibero, 2 years ago when he mentioned, when he mentioned that the A team of the international contractors, the Schlumbergers of this world, the Halliburtons of this world, are not here, right? And he did say something today. If you want them, you have to ask for them. I want a bit of the details. And I want to ask him, we've had these executive orders for 18 months now, where it started in March 2024, right? And hasn't that changed something? Were they not being assured that, despite our local content thing, if you don't do well, if you can't deliver as locals, were those not the kind of things that was scaring them? Why are they not back? What are you seeing when you sit down there with people who operate, the Qatar, where they go? What are you seeing that we don't yet have? We need some of these details for our communicator.
Tony, thank you. In our industry, we who are in the E&P companies, the operators, our job is to look at the resource base, shoot seismic, interpret, draw maps, identify where you want to place wells. I say this so easy, but we're not doing a lot of it like we're doing in the past. But to execute, it's done by service contractors. So let me dimension for you the challenge. 20 years ago, Oga George knows, how many seismic contractors do we have in Nigeria? 20 years ago, 30 years ago. They were competing, whether it was land, whether it was swamp. Today, resident in this country? Almost, maybe zero. They're probably doing, oh, okay, Ogajo says 1. Let me dimension drilling rigs. There was a time that Shelf was the only credible shallow offshore rig company. Shelf Drilling, which has now been bought by ADES of Saudi. And we operated in the shallow offshore. And I think we were talking about 4, 5. Actually, Cornell had 2 or 3 of those rigs with them. Lay barge. I'm just going to give you a few examples. Lay barge to lay pipe in offshore. How many exist in the country today? And I'm saying a functional lay barge, not the one that when it gets to your location, it will break down. Maybe you have 1 or 2. Then the other thing I said was, when we were at 2 million barrels a day, 2.5, for the ladies and gentlemen here who have gray hair, if you go to Sapele, Warri, Port Harcourt, Ugeli, it was a buzz. So if you want to see if activity is going on, you will see service company trucks. You cannot drive between Port Harcourt and Warri and not see a Schlumberger truck or a Halliburton truck in those days. So I'm giving you what we are seeing, but your question was different. Your question is why? These divestments you see today are the outcome of discussions at the corporate head offices of international companies some 5, 10, 15 years ago. That it manifested today is just the journey it has taken. And they took decisions 10, 15 years ago that maybe this onshore axis, with all of its challenges, cash call, insecurity, maybe we should be looking somewhere else. I'll take a guess with ExxonMobil. Exxon had a fairly sizable business portfolio in West Africa. It was Nigeria, it was Equatorial Guinea, it was Chad. They were big. Then Guyana happened. They all don't have more money than they can spend. They always have a budget. When you are not what they see, they'll go somewhere else. Guyana, one country, is the largest spend, 94 billion. I hope you saw it. That 94 billion is part of Nigeria's money that was also been spent here. So why did they leave? Shell the same. Why they left was we had 3 things at play, and we did not solve it quickly. One was the uncertainty with the petroleum industry bill. It took us 20 years. No one is going to take an investment decision, an FID, if they don't know the terms of how they're going to make money. Number 2, simple things like giving gas terms to deepwater assets. We dithered with it, and we were playing, I think Nigeria was playing God, like if it's our oil. They don't like it, they can go. People have options. I think the third one was just the insecurity and the pipeline vandalization. It just made everyone say, what are we doing? Because for the oil companies, if there's a spill, it's a big reputational issue. And hence, they would rather shut in everything rather than have these spills. So this dilemma led the major activity players, the 5, 6 IOCs, to start saying, let's pull back. And that pullback impacts the contractors. So Schlumberger, Baker, Halliburton, who are looking for 5-year contracts, deep water, big projects, FIDs, not getting it, start looking somewhere else. That's what has happened in our industry to date. Now, are they coming back? I believe they are. So the executive order helps, but it takes time. And I'll just mention one or two of the executive orders that have been very good. Now you can issue a contract to somebody for 5 years. You can do 3+2. So an entity that left to come back for a 1-year contract or a 2-year contract, it's not of interest. But now that you can give them a 5-year contract, then the guy can invest in infrastructure to come back here. So I think that's one big one. I think the second one is there have been changes to either the PIA or to the executive order that has allowed some FIDs to be taken. Whether it's Bonga North, whether it's HI, whether it's Kike. Taking those FIDs wakes up the major service companies to start saying, I can see work. But I would not be fair to the local companies, so let me come to them. As it has happened with the operators taking over assets of major oil companies, credibly, the local service companies are doing the same. And they're doing it very well. But for the scale of the activity we have, they are punching way below what is required. If we are producing 1.8 million barrels a day today and a 10% decline every year, to add 1 million, I need to add 1.5 million. 1.5 million barrels of oil a day is a lot of work. It's about 20 FIDs, 30 drilling rigs. So the local service companies, they will step up, they need to step up, and to complement the international ones. But I must say something in respect of this. I will use this example. Why did Nigeria's production fall from 2018? We were at 1.89, almost 2 million barrels a day. And we went to almost 1. I'm not sure if we all know what happened. And I will explain it to you because the opportunity that I've seen to see our production data, 3 things happened. The IOCs deciding to quit and not investing. IOCs actually stopped investing in the last 10 years. If you don't believe it, go and look at the data. And when you stop investing in an asset that's a declining asset, that's number 1. Number 2, COVID. If you go look at the production data, we lost 300,000 barrels a day between 2019 and 2021. COVID, wells quit, you don't go to the field, pumps cease. We've never done a campaign to bring that production back. It's that campaign now that the Renaissances and Seplats are doing to get production to run. The IOCs never did it because by that time, they were already negotiating their exits. And Nigeria was delaying them. Exxon took almost 3-4 years. Who was hurting? It wasn't Exxon, it was Nigeria. And I think the third one was financing. So if you see what has happened, we need our service companies, we need the internationals to come back, and also our local ones to step up. Because the activity load, I actually think is actually times 10. To get to 2.5, our activity has to go times 10. And I don't know where that, even if we had all the money, where's the execution game? I think that's how I will explain the question you've asked me. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you so much. A round of applause. I should ordinarily leave you, but I have one more question that I need to get out of you. See, because once I come back here, we'll be very close to Q&A. You did say that, in that same keynote, it was a management session at least 2 years ago. I'm in the other room. And it was about the evacuation infrastructure. And you did lament that, this particular old evacuation infrastructure where, 6 companies, integrated projects and co, had this essentially 6 pipelines, to terminals. We are not working for 26 or 25 or 24 companies. And I was hoping that we could discuss in the actual conversation what you are seeing in your head as what should be the new evacuation infrastructure. Now that you now even see, have a bird's eye view of everything, what are you suggesting now? Between July, August, and September, Nigerian, overall production dropped, and that's despite the fact that there's a bounce in oil field activity. And one reason last month was the escravos, just by going for maintenance. We had about, an 80,000 barrel decrease per day. So how do we, all of that redundancy, what do we do?
Tony, you keep going to these 2 years. I'll confess something. Tony chases me through the years. I avoid him. No, look, everyone on this panel knows those pipelines were built over 30, 40 years ago. So when you built them for 30 years. That you will either replace them or you do something. We have not replaced most of those pipelines. But what I said was, our industry evolved by the IOCs taking patches. So Shell took the big patch. So they produced through Forcados their oil and their water. Exxon did theirs. But when we started disturbing them, we ants started crawling around them. We were going through their infrastructure. So that infrastructure is aged. It's aged because your design, it's gone past its design life. That's clear. The responsibility is, what do we now need for the future? We're now producing quite a lot of water. That 1.7, 1.8 million barrels a day of oil. I hope you know we're also producing 1.7 to 1.8 million barrels of water.
Even more, yeah.
Maybe even more. So every day, 2 million barrels a day of water are going through. So if you want to go to 2.5, that means we're going to go to 2.5 million barrels of water as well. That means it's 5 million barrels a day. So what I said was, somebody has to sit out and say, what is the evacuation infrastructure when you have multiple players and new dynamics? It's not just oil, it's oil and water. We all pay the IOCs for going through their infrastructure, or they are paying Renaissance now, $3, $4, $5 per barrel. So sometimes we're paying $5 for moving water. That's a waste of money. So the point I made 2 years ago was, somebody needs to sit down, and actually it has to be the big players now. Renaissance is going to take that responsibility on and say, what is the right evacuation system for the western axis and the eastern axis? You may have to replace some pipelines. I would say this, in the past, a year ago, if you said this, somebody in the towers in NPC will call you and say, how can you say that against us? But these days, Bayo calls us, we say, Bayo, we have to tell the truth now, so maybe it's a different. So I'll gladly say it now. The security infrastructure that was put in place, though expensive, has worked, let's be honest, because availability is now 95% and above. So whether we like it or not, that security architecture has worked. Because we have placed it in the hands of those who know and can help us manage it. Is it sustainable? Maybe not, but it is working. But that is just what I'll call the security apparatus. I think what we now need to do is to say, how are we going to build a new evacuation system? And if I had to put my vote on it, you have to do infield dehydration, because you can't move that water. And you have to probably build pipeline systems that's trying to cater for everybody in a more efficient way. All of us going to badge is not the way to go. And I know people will say, well, badging is my only option. If badging is $10, $15, $20, that's on top of your unit operating cost. When Oliver said we are 40%, that's why. So we should not go to expensive options just because we have problems. We should find intelligent ways of doing this. So my key point is we need to sit back and come up with a better evacuation system if we're going to go to 2.5 to 3 million.
Thank you very much. Really do appreciate this. I'm going to come to you, Oga George, because I also know that you worry a lot about the evacuation infrastructure. You actually discussed it in NAPE at some point, but I need to come to the people who will finance us. I also need to get, no, you will still talk about it, please. It's important to get your perspective. But we also need to, because there's a big baton change, crew change in industry, and, professor who is also following you, sir. Actually, this professor went to Ibadan 21 years after you went, yes. So this gentleman, yes. So it's a lot of generations on this panel. So to come, but you are not the one I'm calling. Let me talk to the finance people. I'd like to know from, what both Oliver and Tao said about what, there was a particular line in Tao's paper that talked, and it was a very encouraging line about financial institutions coming back. I actually didn't know that, Middle Eastern institutions are coming back, but they're looking for certain kind of projects. And, I was also beginning to wonder what AFC, after the initial disappointments that you've had in financing some companies in 2011, 2014, wouldn't pay you back quickly, that you actually funded Walter Smith. So, but when you look at projects now, there's a whole lot of midstream gap. And how do you approach, an LPG production project, a CNG production project? Does that have to be tied to the upstream for you? Or can it be a standalone, since already it's a value-adding project? It's not just an extractive project. Can you respond to that? Yes.
Thank you very much. So I think there are two strands to your question. The one around previous transactions that we financed and our experience and how we approach several other aspects of the gas sector. I'll start with the first one. Yes, AFC was active in the first round of divestment. We did finance some projects, and some of them didn't plan out as expected. It's the nature of in the business, sometimes things don't plan out, but I think there were specific things that happened that could have gone better. I think one of the examples is when I go back to what we did then and what we're doing now, the key difference is that we look at the sponsor quality, the sponsor character. When I think about the key characteristics of credit, they talk about character. it's fundamental. So who are you getting into party with by extending if the debt facility, etc. So in the past, there were some assertions and promises that were made by certain characters that didn't plan out. But in this new wave of divestments, there is a change. I think we feel more confident with a lot of the parties that are at play. They've had a lot of experience in the sector. There's a lot of lessons learned about what's gone wrong, which they don't want to replicate. So that gives a lot of confidence. And I think to finish up on that, even the smaller players as well that are coming up in Gentia, Energia, etc., they've also learned as well as to what works in terms of being able to develop a project that will be around for the long term. So sponsor character and quality is super important. I will rank that as highly, in addition to the execution risk, experience, who's the operator, who you're partnering with is fundamental. So to your second part of the question is around how we look at gas, LPG, CNG. Where I sit is mostly on the upstream side of the business. So we're looking at production and financing, and some greenfield and some brownfields. There is AFC also has a benefit because you look across the value chain. There is a specific unit that will look at the transport and logistics, midstream, and even the downstream. So yes, to your question, we can look at it separately as a standalone project. But where you have an opportunity whereby there is value addition across the chain, it's important that you don't look at things in isolation. So we would look to support a company or operator that has the potential to build a project that will provide value across the value chain. I hope that helps.
No, it does. One of the things that fascinates me about AFC is that they are very focused on infrastructure. And I know that when you were in Angola, you went to Dande, Barande, whatever. It's a Portuguese name, supposedly, but I'm calling it with a Yoruba accent. And what you were saying in that post was that this was an exciting logistics. It's a very large refined product storage. And I'm thinking that when you look at the Nigerian project, when a Dangote says that he needs to put some 4,000 trucks on our roads, when we know that part of the major accident challenges that we have are moving fuels, from north to south. What does a company like yours think in terms of financing actual, repairs, improvements of storage depots, of pipelines, that deliver? Those assets need to have uptime now, so you don't replace an inefficient NMPC with a hyper-efficient Dangote that is also repeating the same problems. What do you, where you're sitting, okay, you are upstream, but your company is likely that sort of company that tries to fix that problem?
No, thank you. I can speak to that. So I think the facility you're referring to was the storage terminal in Angola. And yes, it's the government through Sonongo, the national oil company, made a deliberate effort to build the largest petroleum storage terminal in the country. I think it stores about over 350,000 barrels or so per day. And there was the inaugural opening. It was, sometime, it was earlier this year, but when I visited it was last year. So it all stems down to what the vision is an objective. It was driven by a national oil company. I think we were fortunate as a financier to that oil company to see their strategy and their plan with upstream, midstream, and downstream. So we were very supportive. Like you said, we look at things holistically. So it was important for us to participate in that finance because there's a lot of value addition. It helps to reduce emission significantly because there is certain facility that is being created to store petroleum products. B, it doesn't solely rest to maybe the private sector, so to say, to bear that body. You made a reference to Dangote. I think for one individual to take on that baton is huge to build a refinery. So kudos. There are challenges, but I think in somewhere like Nigeria, you need people to beat their chest and say, let's solve the problem. I think our keynote speaker said that you need to be bold, and I think we need more of that. It's not easy, but we do. The other thing you spoke about was on infrastructure pipelines as well. Yes, AFC is very interested that we look at that. We're looking at opportunities, even in Nigeria, across gas transmission. Essentially, that's a monopoly. If you can build an enhanced and existing infrastructure to be able to transport more gas across the infrastructure to increase supply to both to domestic market, that's a win. So we look at that. So I guess in summary, we are focused on opportunities that would lead to further development and growth. So to the extent that the opportunity provides that, we'll consider it.
Thank you. Okay, let me leave you. Let me quickly get to Oliver.
I'm happy to ask some more questions too.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to come back to you, please. It's important to. You're the only. I don't see those other DFIs do some of the things you did. I mean, it's not because you're sitting across from me, but some stuff you've done in Djibouti, some stuff you've done in some very small African countries, fixed refineries, tiny refineries, I mean, I follow all of that, and I think that AFC doesn't get the credit that they should get. I'm still wondering why you haven't progressed the Ghana, but that's upstream, it's not infrastructure. And we can talk about that offline. Let me ask you, Oliver, you had this very wonderful presentation, and the one thing that kept on coming across was your willingness to take on gas development from the perspective of PIA. You say that the PIA provides, some path to significant development of gas in Nigeria, especially from the domestic end. I don't like it when Dr. Fatono is excited that they're doing 1.9 BCF per day for NLNG when we don't have lights in our homes. I mean, that shouldn't be his main talking points. So let me ask you, why are you excited about what the PIA is doing for gas? I haven't seen, for example, what MidGIF is doing. I don't see any massive results of the midstream fund, so I'm one of the skeptics. Let me be not a skeptic.
So the question is, why are we excited about gas? Yes. Yeah. I think, the numbers are staggering, to be honest, right? And I think the picture that we shared on the screen, you could see the buildup of gas supply and then gas demand. It's not just a sort of random projection growth rate that was used to come up with that. We actually went project by project, talked to all the sponsors, try to understand how much gas they're going to consume, whether you're a fertilizer plant or a methanol plant, if you're a gas to power plant, what are you going to use? When are you going to be ready to receive the gas? And so the scale of the opportunity was very visible, right? I think the supply side speaks for itself. right? I mean, the scale of what we have under the, the subsurface is there. And so for us, I think, where we get excited about is starting to see a bit of a, to be honest, quite a shift in terms of the administration's lens on gas. And I think maybe it's useful to sort of call out the administration's signature policy. That's a decade of gas. That is a platform that this nation has put forward to bring radical visibility to all aspects of the gas value chain that need to be resolved so that that picture becomes a reality, right? So it doesn't just become numbers on a page. And I think, what we now start to see is in the first instance of the Decade of Gas program, producers were able to bring forward gas supply projects and say, look, here are the technical unlocks I require, here are the commercial unlocks, here are the fiscal unlocks, here are the contractual challenges I face. Those things were elevated to the highest levels of the country to see. And it was also mapped back to what is the demand, when is the off-taker of that gas going to emerge, and what do they need to do to be ready to receive that gas, and what's the required infrastructure. I think that type of a platform, for me, creates, I think, the conditions so that we finally move past always talking about the potential. We start talking about reality. And I think the proof is in the pudding when you start to see, HI finally take FID. I think when you see Ubeta, Iseni take FID, these are the types of things that are encouraging investors to say, look, there's something going on. And honestly, when I was in Canada recently.
Well, those two projects are export projects.
Sorry?
Those two projects are export.
Yeah, but there's many more in the funnel, right? I think the reality.
Why isn't the Bayelsa fertilizer plant taking off? I mean, that's supposed to be one of the projects you probably have.
Yep, those are the ones that are in the funnel for unlock. And so these projects are now they're being quite visible from the administration. They see the challenges. And we sit in some of those rooms where they're saying, look, okay, if it's a gas supply agreement that is struck, how do we help unlock that? I think the motion is there, right? I think we're starting to see the signs that give me encouragement that this is a sector that's going to finally deliver what is promised.
Child, are there upstream gas projects coming to your table? They are not, I don't mean that they are upstream, gas projects are likely not upstream. But what I mean is that, this develop the gas, let's even not talk about who is taking it. On your table, do you see some of those?
Yes, we do. So, for the number of the upstream projects, you also have a lot of associated gas resource. So we are increasingly seeing a lot of those opportunities as well. So we do look at them. For us, in addition to, the liquid gas is important part of our strategy. We know what the benefit is. It's not even a transition fuel, right? We know what it can do to the domestic economy. So yes, we do look at upstream gas opportunities actually, and we're very open to look at more of them.
Oliver, you didn't complete the response to. I wanted you to talk about what you say the way PIA encourages gas development. I don't mean how this administration, the decade of gas is not the PIA. The decade of gas is some, policy. At the level of regulation, what are you seeing? Why am I not seeing it? I thought I was illiterate.
Well, no, I think it's just the light that has been shone. I think it's the attention, the prominence that gas has in the PIA that has been helpful. And I think, even our keynote speaker touched on it a little bit earlier in the day, seeing some of the executive orders that have come out subsequent to the PIA that have encouraged gas on the infrastructure side, some of the incentives, I think are quite encouraging as well. To your point on the MDGIF, I think you're right. I think we do need to see a little bit more clarity on how that's going to be used, because I think, quite frankly, we've even said that in order to bridge that gas supply and demand gap, there's at least, believe it or not, about $20 billion of required infrastructure required. That's trunk line infrastructure, it's the big transmission asset, pipelines that are needed, that's distribution, and it's also processing. We need at least another 6 BCF per day of processing capacity. And we think that players like the MDGIF are actually going to have a major role as an anchor investor to incentivize the rest of the players to come in. And in the conversations we've had with financiers, that's what's come forward. They say, look, if we're able to find some state funds to play an anchor role with skin in the game, the rest of the funds will actually follow through. So I think that's the other thing.
Okay, before I come back to you finance people, which is very key, and I'm going to ask some of the other panelists to give me a sense of what the financing challenges they are looking at so that you can help solve. Let's do this skills thing that Prof. Last time I checked you online, you were basically talking about reservoir mechanics, and you were talking about hydrogen gas in the cap rock. So I was very surprised. I thought that that's what you are going to talk about here, and then you are talking education. So quickly, you've suggested some very radical transformation of the way universities are engaged by the industry. I mean, when you look at what the industry itself is doing, because we're doing a lot, we're doing Imperial Barrel, we're doing UAP, NAPE is very much invested. What's the difference in what you are bringing, and how do you want government? I mean, because you basically said government is not doing much. What role do you want government now to play in this your agenda? How do you see a company like Renaissance, which is now the so-called new shell, work with you? I mean, work with in the kind of policy that you want. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Please, if for just a second, Prof. We are now in the Q&A mode, and anyone who is interested, we would entertain. We have about 10 to 15 minutes for that. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Just to quickly address the first point that you made about what I've been doing with regard to reservoir geomechanics, especially in relation to carbon capture. I think when I was rounding off my speech earlier, my presentation, I did talk about hydrogen, of course. And of course, hydrogen is the future as we begin this transition to more renewable energy mix also. So essentially, that's why my focus is on all those areas, because I believe, I think I was speaking to you earlier on, we're talking about what you guys look at is when you are looking to, release the check to those who are, you're looking at how sustainable their plan is going to be, their operation is going to be, and the rest. And I mean, I'm based in the UK, and it's come to a point in the UK now that anything you're doing, I'm not even just talking about the oil and gas industry, I'm talking generally across the entire economy. Anything you're doing now, you really need to show the sustainability part of it. Without you showing that, of course, it's going to be a problem getting people to, to partner with you, getting institutions like yours to actually invest. So, having said that, I'll just come to your question now. Of course, the government is trying, but I think there was somebody, I think it was our keynote speaker that said, we still have a long way to go. And the reason for that is that there is really shortage of skill set. If, for instance, we're talking about capacity building, local content development, my own idea of capacity building, in fact, I think it was Mr. Osama talking about some of, I'm not really sure, some of these uh, oil and gas service company, okay, it was Mr. Vero, coming back to Nigeria to offer services. My own idea of local content development is developing technology locally here that supports our industry, including the oil and gas industry, and I think we can do it. In the short term, maybe it's going to be difficult, but in the longer term, I think that's what we're going to be looking at, because if you really want to make everything sustainable, sustainable operation, we need to really develop those skill sets that will be required, especially to advance the oil and gas industry.
What do you want the industry to do that is different from what they
So
are
there
doing
has
now?
to be that strong partnership with India, and there has to be a lot of engagement with the higher education sector, because that is how you can actually drive innovation. Without innovation, honestly, we are going to go nowhere. And no country, no, you saw the Global Innovation Index report that I showed in my presentation. Nigeria is performing very poorly, and there is no country, you can't see, if you look at all the countries that are performing very well in that report, you will see that they are the ones that have the innovation to drive the oil and gas forward, and they are the one actually supplying or providing the innovation that we actually use locally. And yes, it's been like that for years, but I believe that this is the time for change. This is the time for us to begin to look inward. This is in terms of, and government, the industry itself, and the academia or higher education sector, they really need that strong partnership to have those innovation center across the uni, where innovation that are required to drive the oil and gas work can be developed. And that will require funding, and that funding can really come from the government and from the private, of course. The industry must be ready to commit that fund, because if we are just kind of keeping the fund and not, releasing the fund to develop this innovation, then it will be really difficult for us to develop the skill set that we need, and also, of course, to develop the innovation that is really required. Oil and gas, you would agree with me, is a technology-driven sector. And so it is innovation that drives technology building. So we really need to focus on that, using the strong partnership between the industry, the government, and of course the higher education sector. And so the engagement with the higher education sector must be strong, must be purposeful at this time.
All right. Prof, the audience will come to you because we need to do a little bit more on anyone who is asking a question should also find a way of putting Prof to task. I don't think that I've asked him enough. So David, you want to start off? Oh, okay, there's a president here. All right. So first him and then him.
You mean David?
David, yeah, David,
okay.
I'm not amazing. Yeah.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Anomnese from Seplat. I have two questions, one to Madam Okwo, and the second question to any of the panelists. So the first question is, you talked about character for potential, for companies who are looking for funding from AFC. And in terms of character, also looking at the history, in terms of how they perform debt servicing and all. So when we look at for a new company that is just starting, a new team, perhaps they have significant years of experience, but no industry project per se in terms of project experience, how would you recommend that they go ahead to secure funding from AFC? That's the first question. Then the second one, which actually goes to any member of the panelists, is with respect to what Oga Adeyemi has said just today, looking at for us to be able to match our targets in the next few years, that's 2030, we might need to get some service companies from the international space into Nigeria to support the local service companies. I also feel we have some challenges also from even the subsurface technical staff. If you look around us today, you see that there are just very few young people here who are actually, ready and who also have the skill set to actually do some of this job. And recently, like 5-10 years ago, I have
like a whole chunk of middle career people who actually left Nigeria to many other spaces. And when I interact with these people and I ask them, why you live in the country, the very first thing is, first, where I'm working at the moment, they are not giving me that form of comfort, or I've been working here as a contract staff for the past 10 years, no benefit, no reward, no gratuity plan. I don't have anything in place for me, and I'm even struggling to pay the bills, you know. So those challenges are preeminent here and there. Then the second phase is, you also have a set of people who are in their late 50s, preparing to retire with significant years of experience, 50s, 60s. Then you have very few people who are in their 30s and 40s, struggling to do a lot in this industry. What does this portend to us in the next 10 years? What do we do to address this challenge? Thank you.
That will be Mr. Sahon. That second question, Mr. Sahon. The very first question to the AFC, of course.
Okay. Okay, great question, and thank you for that. Not surprising, the question came up. So, every great thing starts with something or someone, and you don't always have to have all the dots aligned, okay? So, I mean, we give an example. Maybe Dr. Fatten is not the example because he had a lot of experience, but I think what I'm trying to say is that in my line of business, we come across sponsors with opportunities all across other parts of Africa with the project. But what will make it come together is, what is the team composition? One person in that team doesn't have to have had 20 or 30 years of oil and gas experience, and one person doesn't make a company. So what is the team experience and composition that is looking to seek finance and develop a project? That's important, right? So you can bring finance to the party. Who's your technical partner? Who are your advisors? That's what's gonna make the old stew very sweet, just to be practical, right? So I guess my point is that, who are you partnering with? Do you have the ingredients or element to develop the company, to do what you're going to sign up to? And going back to what I said, we always play the long game, right? It's about building a sustainable business. We don't want to give capital to someone, a company in year 1 or 2, and they're struggling. And maybe the company has taken on too much debt, or the team is falling out, etc. But life happens. So to answer your question directly, who are the technical partners? Who are the other financing partners? How does that ingredient all come together? That gives us as financiers more comfort as to how the business as to how the business is positioned from day one and where the trajectory is. Thank you. So we don't completely discount a company that's not been around for a long time. We want to be able to see and support them and see them deliver on their project.
Yeah, thank you very much. Did you get the question, sir? The second question, yes.
I think the question is about what needs to be done to retain the current set of technical people in the industry, and of course, probably even attract more. But you can rephrase it the way you want. Did I get it right? Is it okay? Okay. Now, it's a multi-pronged attack. There is no easy way to do it. Somebody called it a hollowing out effect, when quite a number of our highly trained technical personnel have literally left the country. Today, I can say for real that about 80 to 90% of people that used to work in the major oil and gas companies have their families, or they have themselves abroad, and some of them that are here, their families are there, and so on and so forth. So they're not really here because they love it. They are here because they think Jesus needs to earn some money. That's all. Now, how do we change that? First and foremost, there has to be a way to train people the way Shell used to do. I'm mentioning Shell because everybody knew about it. What used to be SITP those days. SITP will train you, but you don't have to work for Shell. I think I'm correct. So a lot of people who are trained by them, sometimes they train about 130, take 40. We need to do something along that line. Now, let me refer to what Prof said about having some collaboration between operating companies and the universities or the tertiary institutions. There's nothing wrong with that. But I don't want to condemn what is going on. I do know that NAPE did sponsor the procurement of some 3D interpretation machines to the universities. Some of them are under lock and key till tomorrow, not being used. So the question is, how do you then combine with such institutions to develop these people? That's why I can imagine that SITP was essentially done by foreign lecturers, foreign trainees, foreign trainers for these people. That's one. Then another way to look at it is this. The new set of companies that not taking over, but overtaking the major operating companies. I don't believe in takeover. They have overtaken them in terms of production. What they need to do is to apply what in my head is like 5 Ps. Get a lot of people, which is what some of us are doing right now, graduate training program, but that's not good enough. You need to do something a lot bigger than that. When you employ these people, drive into them some purpose. Think about the country. Think about where you are going, Canada, America, wherever. Somebody built all those places. What are you doing? That's one. Think about the pay for them. How much are you going to pay them? 3, think about progression along their career. Do they have a career plan? Now, by the time you look at all of that, and I think I have 2 more, then pride, that's a little bit of some issues. The question is, the Nigerian thinks of himself as being a superstar anywhere he goes. But the man that doesn't queue here because he thinks he's big, when he goes outside the country, he queues up. Let him know that he's not any better out there than he is here. Draw that into him. Then he also needs some protection. By the time a staff knows that in 20 years from now, his life is guaranteed, his children can go to school, whether they want to go to school here or not, it doesn't matter, that he has a life ahead of him. There is a tendency for him to want to stay. Now, let me draw an anecdote here. Very bad story. I'm an NNPC product, I'm sure you know that. At the time NNPC came up with the NNPC from NNOC idea, they employed some people from overseas, and quite a number of people came in that time. I refer to a man, I don't want to mention his name, he has a doctorate from America, he came in. 2 things happened to him. They told him they were going to bring his luggage from America. Don't worry, we'll do everything. The first thing that happened, he got to Nigeria, Lagos Airport, and he realized that it was a place he left about 10 years before and said, that useless country, I won't go back. But of course, he did come back. He did come back. But at the time he was in America, he said, we don't need God here. This place is so nice, you get everything at your fingertips. So I don't need God. When he came back, when NNPC employed him, when he came back, he got to the airport. He went flat on his stomach. I said, God, I think I'm back because I need you now. Now, that's only one part of the story. His luggage that they promised will come took 2 years. Not 1 year, not 2 months, 2 years to come. Now, think of all of that. By the time he spent 5 years in NNPC, he said he was going to go on his own separate job and so on and so forth. The story is so bad. You cannot think of a career path for yourself. If you have that as part of the 5 Ps I mentioned, there will be a tendency to attract these young people to stay. Like somebody said, when you look at all the heads here, they're all gray. It shouldn't be like that. In fact, people like us shouldn't be sitting here and here. You should be the one sitting down here so that we can be listening to you. Any more questions? Thank you very much.
Tony, just to add something to the question, and this is a challenge to all of us, maybe NAPE. We do a graduate recruitment process every 2 years, and we go to all the universities, and we are looking for graduates. So geoscience, engineering, scientists. But let me make a first statement. When we go, we get fantastic students from Nigerian universities, fantastic. In the last 4, 6 years, the quality has just been unbelievable. Comparative, and sometimes even better than overseas. So some of our universities are doing a fantastic job. But the challenge is to the geoscientists. We will start with almost 50,000 applicants. We go through this normal process. When we end to the last 20 or 30, we're looking for geoscientists in the mix. So this is my challenge to explorationists. You'll find engineers, you'll find chemical, mechanical, civil, structural, but you won't find just... So we have to start saying, go down the list, let's see where our geologists are, and what was their score? Can we still take them on? I think my message is, there's something going on that people aren't going to study the geoscience and subsurface courses. And I think NAPE has a point to do here. Because you can say we're looking for them. You can't convert a mechanical engineer to a geologist. You can't convert a civil engineer to a geophysicist. Maybe a physics, maybe a math student can be converted. So there is work to be done by NAPE. You may have to start to help the universities and encourage and give even more scholarships to the subsurface geoscience pool so they can go and study these courses. Because there's a dearth. I think in our last one, we had 15 people we were bringing in this year. Maybe one was a geoscientist.
Sorry, can I ask you something very quickly? Is it in terms of the number of people coming forward or the quality of those geoscientists? Is the quality? Okay.
It's equality, okay, but also the numbers. So I have asked to say, okay, show me the top 200. Who is in that list? It will be maybe 10% are geoscientists. So something is happening that they're not in that feedstock. Thank you.
That's a very strong word. President Ajibola, please.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to ask. I think the question will cut across the table, apart from Oliver. And also, of course, to NAPE, and whoever is coming in as the next president-elect or who is leading the association as the president. This is the second time this year that someone is going to punch me with the basic truth. Dr. Fatonon was the first person this year to do that. I've not been able to solve the problem, and I feel sad that I'm still not able to solve the problem. But if I'm not able to solve the problem, I'll come back to you. But Mr. Adeyemi Bero said something that all of us missed out completely. And I want to take him on, and that will cut across the table. And the chairman in Nigeria, I told Dr. Fatonon that he bought Shell, but he never agreed that he bought Shell, having worked there. And then the Taiwo, who will be telling us about exploration funding, if you have such on your table, and what are some of the risks, or what are some of the challenges that you face in funding exploration opportunities. But the question is this, Mr. Beru. You have just told us something that all of us should be worried about, especially the young ones. As explorationists, are we still explorationists? That's the question. And the basic truth is that we are no longer explorationists. This is my feeling. The reason is this. We are not drilling exploration wells, which is what he has said. You mentioned that you are drilling exploration well. I'm going to ask you a question, whether it is actually exploration well or not. I've spoken with one of your staff members. And the truth is this. As long as we are still carrying the 1977 well classification for wells, we do not, especially in the onshore and the shallow water, we do not have any well currently based on that classification that qualifies as an exploration well. NUPRC will tell you, and I've seen Arade made a lot of fantastic presentation. So I'm building up a story. It's very important. This aspect is very important because what we have currently, where we operate, within the threshold where we are operating in the onshore and the shallow water, what we have within the deep pool is even bigger than where we are now. And this is where we have these new reservoirs that will qualify as exploration wells based on the current well classification. And this is the challenge. If we do not alter the PIA to reflect the new reservoirs that are yet untapped, between 3,500 to about 6,000 meters, we can convert that to feet. This is where we have the new place for exploration. So for exploration, we are now being used as production and opportunities. The companies have left, but the question is this. What are the companies doing with exploration campaigns? Renaissance, what is your exploration campaign? Energia, what is your exploration campaign? First EMP, what is your exploration campaign? And for Taiwo, do you have exploration opportunities on your table that you are willing to fund? This is my question. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so he was very specific about who he wants to answer. So yes, AFC and Dr. Fatono.
Okay, my response is going to be very short. It's a no. We don't finance exploration in the oil and gas space. It's just not within our sweet spot, and risk appetite, risk reward threshold, it doesn't sit with us. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend that we look at exploration. We don't. Yeah. But interestingly, there are new ways that people are exploring financing exploration. I don't know how it's common to Nigeria, but you are seeing new funds all across, even the continent, looking to set up exploration funds, small amount of capital to expand, to go alongside sponsors who are in the early stage of development. But AFC doesn't fund exploration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ajibola, you're a serious troublemaker. You come in front of the whole audience of NAPE and you ask them, are they explorers? Now, I'm just one of them. So my answer is not on behalf of everybody. I think we lost the steam. Explorers amongst us, they're still existing. I have Prof here, I have Andrew. I have quite a number of explorers. But are you all still explorers? Yes, you are. But how many of your kindred have you left in the system? Absolutely very few. Now, Ajibola, let me give you a little bit of an insight. Last week, at the last board meeting of Renaissance, we, board members of Renaissance, deliberately decided that exploration was going to be a very strong focus for us. And it is not just an expression of intent. It is something that we deliberately recognize that if we don't do it, all these so-called unproven reserves will never come into the funnel. And the focus is on this society, NAPE. Remember, our idea is find oil and gas. But where are the people? It's a very serious question. We are not, and we don't have explorers. I remember when Mr. Yamu died, I described him as an explorer's explorer. He was one man who found explorers as an explorer. So I want to take your challenge on, and I think I'm not going to speak for other companies. There has to be a very deliberate focus to go back to our exploration mindset, finding new reserves. Thank you.
Note, our own job is ended. Wow. Lisa, do you want to?
Can we, no, sirs, I know you are my elders, but we're quite pressed for time. Please, indulge us, please. Thank you. Just remain seated for 2 or 3 minutes. Let's welcome the president-elect. After her vote of thanks, we'll give you your gifts, and that will be it. Please, a warm applause for Mrs. Olajumoke Cecilia Ajay F. NAPE.
Thank you. Good afternoon once again, everyone. I must commend our speakers, our keynote speakers and panelists for a job well done. I believe you will all agree with me that this has been an engaging and insightful pre-conference. And I don't think we could have gotten better people to do justice to the theme of this year's pre-conference. Thank you very much for taking time off your busy schedule. I know you are all very busy people. You didn't send people to represent you. You came in person. We called on you. We called on you, and I know I spoke with many of you, and once, none of you said, oh, I'm very busy. Immediately you accepted. Thank you very much for believing in NAPE and for taking time out to give these insights that we've all had today. Thank you very much. God bless you, and I believe that when we call on you next time, you will definitely honor our call again. This is just the beginning. Our conference starts with opening ceremony on Monday, and I believe you'll all be there. Thank you very much. And I know that after this, I won't come up again for another vote of thanks. So let me thank all our past presidents. I was so surprised today seeing, almost 10 past presidents here. That table is filled with past presidents of NAPE. Elders of our, our association. When I say elders, retirees, they've retired many years ago and they are here. It shows you how much they believe they have in NAPE. And if elders like this can be coming for our events, so who are we, the young ones? And those who are even younger than me in this hall. So for them to believe in NAPE, you know that there's something special about NAPE, which none of you should take for granted. Thank you very much, sirs, for believing in us, we younger ones that are carrying up, continued with the work you've done in the past. Thank you very much, sirs. And other fellows that are here, we appreciate you. Thank you, and I believe you know that next week is the main week when we'll be having our conference. I believe you all be there too. And to all invited guests that have honored today's invitation, thank you, and I believe that you've taken some things from the discussion of today that will go with you. So lastly, before that, let me just thank all our ESCO members. Our president, thank you for taking time to be here today, and all other ESCO members that are around. And finally, I want to thank the pre-conference workshop planning committee. They were the ones who put this together. Yes, I'm the chairperson of the conference planning committee, but there's nothing I can do alone without these dedicated people. So I would like those who are in this committee, pre-conference workshop committee, to stand up so that we can all appreciate you. Chairman, please, everyone stand up if you're in the room. Please, I want you to help appreciate for putting this together. So this is just the beginning. With what we've seen here today, I know you will believe that we have more in stock. Just come next week and experience more. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, sirs. Thank you, ma.
Thank you very much, ma. Let's invite the president to now present to you your gifts real quick. President, Mr. John Bosco Uche F. NAPE. P, don't go too far. You will join them for the family photo once he's done presenting to them. Once again, a big thank you to our moderator, Mr. Tony Akiosho F. NAPE. Thank you. Please, let's present. Guys, come up. Let's present him with our gift. Give the president the first one. Give him just one now. Just one. Give him one. Okay, let's start with the keynote speaker. Okay, that's fine. Mr. Demola Adeyemi, Your Excellency, sir. Thank you so much for such a beautiful keynote that laid a fantastic foundation. And then, of course, our past president and fellow, Mr. George Osahon F. NAPE. Thank you so much, sir, for your insights. You gave those figures of just speaking off the cuff like that and reeling those numbers. That was brilliant and fantastic. Thank you. Dr. Lai Fatono F. NAPE. He now is becoming the explorer's explorer by helping us find more explorers. Thank you so much. And the professor who has not told us whether he has returned or is still playing for Jakpa FC, well, we will find out sometime. Thank you, Professor. Thank you so much. Thank you. Taiwo, we don't know whether you would fund the thing in the future, exploration that is, but help us find the explorers. We'll appreciate it. Thank you so much. Well, Oliver, I don't know whether you agree with our past president who wants us to touch the PIA for those 2,000-3,000 meters, or is it feet, he said. But regardless, thank you for your insights. Thank you so much. All right, there you have it. So you now please rise for a family photo, PE. One more, a moderator. Oh, I thought I called him earlier. Egbonti, my own oracle, my personal oracle. Thank you so much for the fantastic job of driving the conversation with your in-depth analysis. You know, you ask questions like you're asking senators to interview a minister designate. Please.
Yes. So before the picture, please, for the speakers, can we give them a standing ovation?
Please, you can please rise now for family photo. Please, family photo. Family photo.